Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BI Livecast series. My name is Carrie Keenan, and I'm one of the program directors here at Brand Innovators. I want to welcome everyone to our C-Suite Marketing and Leadership Livecast. Today's going to be really special, and I'm thrilled to get us kicked off. We've got a phenomenal agenda today with an awesome lineup for you. Before we get started, I do want to, first of all, thank all the marketers, sponsors, and you, the audience, for helping make this event possible. Throughout the event today, you'll be able to use the Q&A widget and a chat widget down at the bottom of your screen. And we do encourage you to engage with our speakers and the other attendees using those widgets throughout our program. So now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Matt Eisenhacker, the SVP of Brand Strategy and Innovation at First Watch, and their moderator, Tori Lee, Sales Manager from Nextdoor. Welcome, everyone.
Hey, everyone.
Hi there.
How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you, virtually at least.
Very nice to see you as well. It's still a little odd when you can join and reach so many people now via screen without even going to a conference. So it's nice to see you.
Yes, it's very nice to see you. I'm thrilled to be here today, and I'm really excited to talk with you, Matt. Matt, who is the SVP of Brand Strategy and Innovation at First Watch. You have an impressive background in the food and dining industry, and we connected last week kind of in preparation of this call. And what really stood out to me when we connected is your passion for customer experience every time someone walks into one of your restaurants and the community you're building around those locations. So I'm just really excited to dive into things. How does that sound?
Excited to share our story with so many people as well.
Great. Well, just to kind of start things off, tell us a little bit more about your background, how you ended up at First Watch.
Yeah, actually, so I've been in restaurants for about 10 years, and I think it's noteworthy because I think the exciting thing for the industry is that we're starting to see a lot of people come in from other industries, especially retail and even beauty and hospitality. So I was one of those. I came from consumer products, so I was actually trained by the world's largest food company. I worked for Nestle, and I got to work on a variety of their brands and also in their innovation groups. So I've always been somewhat in food. And before I came to First Watch, I was actually at a brand based out of Columbus, Ohio, named Piatta Italian Street Food. And it's a brand that's still near and dear to my heart. And the way that I ended up there was I just walked in one day and I thought it was super cool. And for anyone that doesn't know who they are, I should check them out. And I just wrote a note to someone I didn't know and shared some ideas, and I ended up there. And then I had the opportunity to come to First Watch and based in Bradenton, Florida, and the rest is history. But I was excited to join the team here because First Watch has been doing what it's doing for 40 years. Great team, great group of people. And for the last several years, we've been the fastest growing full service brand in the United States.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. And I love your story about the handwritten note. I think we don't do that anymore these days, so I'm going to have to give it a try myself.
Old school, I know, but it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you guys are definitely growing rapidly. I believe over 440 locations across the US. You're in 28 states. And then you've been in the industry for a while. So what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the dining industry over the past 5 years?
Well, boy, and then you put COVID in the middle of that, which put everything on steroids. I'll reference technology probably a lot of times today, and it's more because that's one of the more prevalent changes you're seeing in the industry right now. I mean, it's the rate of change with technology, and whereas years ago it would have taken years to see certain bits of technology advance, and notably the restaurant industry is actually pretty far behind in terms of technology. They've just been slower to adopt, and the systems are a little more siloed. And that's the cool thing about seeing people come into the industry, because they're bringing learnings that you're seeing from these other industries, and it's made it really exciting. The other thing I'd say is, I always say the Instagramization of food, and I realize it's probably not really a word. Maybe it is. I don't know, but
we can make it a word after this interview.
somewhere, but. You're seeing culinary trends move so much faster. And, I look at Berea right now is one of those trends that you're starting to see everywhere. And the rate of change you see that going through, even all the way to QSR or fast food restaurants, like it's happening so quickly because everyone's on their phone, everyone's a chef now. And so for restaurants, you really have to think about how you mobilize things to your menu faster, which has been a really fun challenge, and something I think First Watch does exceptionally well, because younger, especially Gen Z, even more than other generations, they expect everything to be on trend and new, and they're already a step ahead of you. And so I think that's one of the cool and exciting things you've seen with the restaurant industry, because the rate of change has just happened so much faster.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the most effective and positive trend in the industry coming out of COVID is just how restaurants of all sizes now embrace technology. And, during one of our conversations, you kind of talk about the customer experience when they walk into one of your restaurants, and how you kind of tie in technology when they're in there and they can order from a tablet and they put it down. Can you share a little bit more about some of those tactics in terms of customer experience and technology that you're focused on?
Yeah, I'll be even more straightforward and say,
yeah,
we're probably even just in the early incubation stage. So obviously we're a full service restaurant, and over the past few years, you've seen fast food and fast casual, I think, be a little bit more of a first mover as it comes to infusing technology into the experience. And I think, look, I wouldn't want to have to go through the way it happened with COVID, but it did put it, in the full service industry, it did force us to move faster and not be as reluctant in integrating technology. So for us at First Watch in 2019, if you wanted the place to go order, you had to call us on the phone. And by the way, we hand wrote it on a ticket in at the beginning of 2020. We hand wrote it on a ticket. We passed it to another human being in the kitchen, and they read it out to the rest of the kitchen. Like, if you just sit and ponder that for a moment, it's incredible. And so all at once that changed. And so, I think the biggest thing that we're doing right now is we're starting to bring technology into our kitchens. We're bringing screens into the kitchens, and we're allowing things to be somewhat automated, so you're not relying on a human being. And so that's probably been the fastest thing that we've been able to do, that's allowed our teams to increase our speed of service, and to allow us to bring these new takeout and off-premise channels into our restaurants, which we were not doing before. And so I think for us, the next frontier is, we're doing that to make the job easier for our teams. That's what we're doing to make our kitchens easier. But now it's about looking at the customer through their lens. And what's really exciting is we're able to look at that person from the moment that they're home, wanting to join our wait list, because our waits can be up to an hour and a half on the weekends. From the moment they decide to do that, all the way through the way they pay when they want to leave, is looking at how technology can find those points of friction and to release that friction and to elevate the overall experience. So I think the way you have to think about it, especially in full service, is never look at technology for technology's sake. You have to consistently look through the eyes of the customer and the journey they go through, and try to apply it only at points where you see points of friction to benefit them.
Yeah, and it sounds like your team over there is really focused on simplifying that customer experience with technology. So, when you walk into a restaurant, it's more about engaging with who you're there to eat with. It's engaging with the food that you're serving them. And speaking of which, I did look over your food ethos, and as someone who tends to or tries to be a healthy eater when I go out and eat, what really stood out to me is just the fresh produce and how First Watch prepares their meal. Can you tell us a little bit more about the background on the food ethos and how that came about?
I'm flattered that you went and saw that on our site, because we wear that ethos, our food ethos, as a badge of pride, for sure. And
Yeah.
that's why we wanted that to be on our site, so people understood it. And, a lot of times when you see our food and the way it comes out of the kitchen, it is Instagrammable, and it's so fresh. And, I forget the exact number, but somewhere around 25 to 30% of what we bring in our back door is fresh produce. And we get a lot of shipments to allow us to keep up with the amount of fresh produce that we use. And so initially, when people see that, they always ask us, like, oh, do you source locally? Because I think that's where people go. But for us, we think about it a little bit differently, and we call it follow the sun. And we like to say that we like to go to the parts of the US that have the freshest, most in-season produce at that time. And so, we get strawberries, in the summer from California, and then in the winter that shifts right up the road from where we are in Florida. And because, you want to go where the food is freshest. And the other thing I think is Chef Shane, our head chef, I give him a lot of credit because, we have a juice called Watermelon Wake Up. It's like one of our best selling juices. And he always gets asked, like, why don't you add it to the menu all the time? And he's like, because you don't want watermelon outside of the summer. Or his favorite dish is the Mexican elote street corn hash. And we traditionally only have it in the summer because that's when the corn's the freshest. And so we really try to live by this ethos of building really good partnerships with our makers, bakers, and growers, and going to the part of the U.S. where food is freshest. And so I'm glad you were able to see that.
Yeah, and it sounds like you guys operate everything from technology, customer experience, how you prepare your food through the customer lens, and what is going to be best for our customer. It's the freshest produce. It's the most simple experience when you're ordering at a restaurant, and the overall experience when you step into one of your stores. So I love that. I think people are dining out more than ever now with us just coming out of COVID and wanting to be in the community again. And I know on Nextdoor alone, about 96 of our neighbors eat out at a restaurant. So from your perspective, what makes First Watch kind of stand out from other competitors?
Well, I'll say at a top level, it's food and people, or freshness and people, excuse me. And that might sound like a generic answer, but let me explain what I mean. We are who we are because of our people, and we're able to grow as fast as we are because of our people. And what's most noteworthy about First Watch is we have been doing what we're doing for 40 years. And a lot of times, I think you started to see fast casual really grow, I don't know, maybe around early 2000s into 2010, it kind of exploded. And you see a lot of restaurant brands that have been around for 3 to 5 years, and they're trying to scale and open up units. And you haven't even found your sea legs yet. And so for us, doing what we've been doing for 4 decades, like, it's not uncommon to find people in our leadership in our restaurants that have been here for 20, 25, 30 years. And it's just so cool to see, because that's what, during COVID, we saw that come through. We just have the most passionate people that in the restaurant industry, you have to remember, you're not really just serving food, it's a people business. And so we're very lucky to have that as what has made us very successful. And then the other part of what I would say is the freshness of our food. You touched on that a little bit with our ethos, but we change our menu 5 times a year. So every 10 weeks, we're changing our menu. And that is for a restaurant company with as many restaurants as we have, and as fast as we're growing, it is extremely difficult. But we know how important that is, because it allows you to demonstrate freshness. It allows you to stay in tune with the seasons, and it allows you to bring those on-trend moments to the menu that otherwise could be debilitating for an organization. And so now for us, that's a well-oiled machine. And to better illustrate the freshness, we're very proud. We like to point to our fresh juices that the first thing our managers do when they come in the restaurants in the morning is they juice fresh fruits and vegetables. And we've had a lot of larger organizations that have come to us and said, how are you doing this at scale? Like, how are you doing this? And so, we get really proud about those types of things. And we always say that freshness has to be at the center of our culinary philosophy. And I think we do that very well.
Yeah, I think so too. And kind of like what you mentioned, what was it? The Wake Me Up watermelon juice that's only seasonal?
Oh yeah, the watermelon wake up, man. People love watermelon in the summer.
I could use that today. But I'm sure, for someone who comes into your restaurants yearly, they probably look forward to that season when that juice is back. So there's almost a personal affinity with coming into that restaurant during the summer and getting that juice that you can't get anywhere else, and also that you can't get at any time at First Watch.
Well, it's like a treasure hunt when you think about it.
Yeah.
Like, we have all of the favorites you'd normally expect from a breakfast restaurant. So if you want a traditional breakfast, you have that. But then you get to always come in and there's always something new. And so that's the excitement we want to deliver for our customers.
Yeah, I love sitting down at a restaurant and just knowing, you're not going to get the same menu every time, and it changes. And to know that it's fresh, I think it's just an overall great experience. Yeah. And you touched on this a little bit, but the people part, and obviously that's the foundation of any company. And we've gone through a lot the past couple of years. So I'm curious to learn from you as a leader, how are you leading your team through change and keeping people motivated during uncertain times?
Even in those early days, like I'll never forget the moment when we were sitting there as a leadership team talking about COVID, and someone said, Ohio just closed all their restaurants. What do you mean? Like, how does that, what does that even, how can that be possible? And especially for those first few months, like nobody had any answers, right? And I guess the one thing I've learned over the past 2 years is, especially in leading a team, is transparency and being very human about what you do. And so I think it's okay, like when you go through moments like this, to admit that you may not know the answer. I've done that countless number of times with my team. And you say, but we're going to figure it out. And it's okay not to have those answers. And so I think it's really important. I think Chris, our CEO, did that remarkably well in those early months. Like he would go and talk to all of our employees and he would say, look, here's what we're doing to support you. We don't know. We don't know over the next 6 weeks, but we're in this together, and we'll keep our culture and our values intact, and we will stay in communication with you. And that is the reason that when we came back, we had voluntarily decided to close our restaurants for about 6 weeks to keep our team safe. And when we came back, the amount of people that rejoined us was astounding. And I think they valued the transparency, and they know that we led with our values and we're very human about it. And so I think that's the lesson I've learned over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you guys not only invest in your customers and take everything from a customer first approach, but also a people first approach when you're thinking about your employees, and especially navigating them through times of change. And what I think is so great about that is when you invest in your people and they know that you care for them, that translates into the customer experience too, that they're giving to people who walk into your stores. A happier staff, a happier restaurant, like ambiance. So that's all great to hear.
And Tori, you actually just hit on something we didn't discuss, and that is we actually have a phrase that talks about our culture, and we call it "you first." It's a "you first" culture. Yeah. And what we mean by that is we believe that if you take care of your teams are going to take care of your customer. And it's just a cycle that works. And so, you know it.
I love it. I mean, it sounds like you guys are growing rapidly too, right? I believe you guys are opening a few stores this year. So when you're thinking about growing rapidly, how are you balancing that with staying local?
Yeah, I think especially in the breakfast space. So the breakfast space is somewhat interesting because it's probably the most underdeveloped day part, whereas lunch and dinner there's a lot of competitors, a lot of different options. There's less so in the breakfast space. And so when we go into these markets, new markets, it's all of the 1 and 2 unit places that you're competing with. That we like to say that there's no one doing what we're doing at scale. And so we are very careful that balancing that growth with staying local and not just becoming a place that stamps out restaurants. And the thing that I would probably point to the most is, if you've been to one First Watch, you've been to one First Watch. And I think the hallmark of a large, fast-growing brands is they take the easy path where they just start to develop their box, their restaurant, and you kind of just go and you just make them. And that couldn't be further from what we do. I mean, we actually have a team across multiple departments here that sit every Monday and look at every restaurant that will be opening. And when you think of opening, 35, 40, 45, 50 restaurants, like that's very difficult to do with as many people in the room designing those restaurants. But we iterate on them and we make sure that each one of them have localized elements and that doesn't look like the one before it. And we were able to learn from the last one and apply new things. Like recently we've been adding indoor, outdoor bars. Mm-hmm. So that you have air coming in and out of the restaurant, and you get this great occasion where it kind of elevates the entire feeling of the restaurant. We add interior localized murals. We've been adding exterior murals that are all unique and different. And so, I mean, you get it. We want to make sure that each First Watch is different and that fits into the community uniquely that it's joining.
I love hearing that. And here at Nextdoor, obviously, we're really focused on, building communities and just cultivating a world where everyone feels like they have a neighborhood you can rely on. And it's the little things like that really help people feel at home when in their neighborhood. It's going to a local restaurant where you're seeing local murals that you won't see anywhere else. I think that really resonates with people, and it becomes almost more than just a restaurant you eat at. It becomes a place where you build memories and, with your friends and family and your neighbors.
So one thing I'll add there, I know I've talked about technology a lot, but on the other side of that, the thing that I get the most excited about with First Watch is that we have become a gathering place in our communities. And, we're not shrinking our dining rooms, we're expanding them. And yes, we offer takeout and all of that, but for us, it still stays true. And in our dining rooms, what we know is we're not just serving breakfast. but it's two friends that just finished a yoga class and they want to go somewhere to connect, or it's a family on Saturday that's going out and having their moment as a family. And so we really do see our place in our communities as a point of gathering and connection. And we hear that a lot from our customers as well. So I think it's important to say that, even though we do talk about technology and what it can do to elevate hospitality, it's also important to realize that, we also want to be a place people sit around the table together too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we touched on this a little bit, but the changes we've seen in the industry as it relates to technology leading up to this point. But what are some emerging trends that you're seeing in the industry that you're excited about, or that you're even just a little bit more curious about?
Yeah, for us, I'll speak uniquely. Like, I think on the weekends, we, like I said, could have an hour and a half wait. And that's a missed opportunity for us. And so, I constantly with our team try to think of how can technology hit points of friction like that? How can we make the wait more enjoyable? Could we ever allow you to input your order ahead so that it's there and you don't have to wait when you hit the table? I'm just throwing out ideas here, but I think the cool thing is that casual dining, I shouldn't say casual, full service dining is realizing for the first time that technology doesn't have to be transactional. That technology can actually elevate the overall occasion if you apply it in the right places. And so I think that's the most exciting thing that First Watch, as well as the industry, has ahead of it.
And then when you're thinking about just in general what First Watch is going to market with or focused on going to market with, can you share anything about that with us?
Well, I think for us, it's about continuing to prioritize our teams. And that's where a lot of that technology that we're doing to bring into our kitchens allows them better quality of life. One of the things I also like to point out is that, we're only open 7 a.m. to 2:30 every day. And that allows our teams a quality of life that is, you can't find in a lot of places in this industry. And so that, coupled with ways that technology can improve and take work off of their plates that make the job easier, is really the thing that we're most excited about, as well as making sure that we're offering more technology to our customers to make that experience more seamless.
Right. And I think, work-life balance, everyone can appreciate that, especially your employees. So having that as an option, operating on the people's first, you guys really live through not only your food ethos, but I'm sure with your core mission value as a company. So that's great to hear.
Yeah. We hear, a lot of times we'll constantly go back to our team and say, hey, when are you getting out in the afternoon? And if we hear times like 5:30, we get pretty maniacal about, okay, how can we, what's going wrong? How can we help? We want you to get home so that you can get home to your family. You can, get kids off the school bus. You can do whatever you're going to do as a hobby in the evenings. And so that's really important. And that's something that within daytime dining with First Watch closing at 2:30 that we see as a real competitive advantage within the industry, especially right now in times when, you read the articles too, how difficult it is in the labor market. So.
Yeah, certainly. And if we're looking at First Watch maybe 5 years from now, what are some of the things you would be most proud of about the company? And you've touched on this, people, customer first, but there's anything else that we haven't really touched on today, we'd love to hear it.
So I'll say this selfishly that, even though we have 440 restaurants and we've talked about our growth, our awareness in the United States, even though we're in 28 states, is very, very low. And we're okay with that because we want that awareness to grow organically. But I think for us, for more and more people to get introduced to who we are and what we do, is the thing we're most excited about, because we like to say that we think sometimes we're the best kept secret in the industry, and so we're just excited to be able to raise that awareness, to let more people organically discover who we are. We don't advertise heavily because we think that takes away from the genuine feel of who we are as a brand, as I hope you feel through this. And so, it's just as we continue to grow year after year like we are, making sure more and more people figure out who First Watch is.
Got it. And, I manage a sales team over here at Nextdoor, and I cover the retail and dining vertical. So what you're saying is very different than what I'm hearing from a lot of other marketers, that you actually want to be a best kept secret and kind of grow through organic growth. So how are you doing that right now? Is it just through word of mouth? Is it creating such a great customer experience that people want to leave and tell their friends and family about First Watch? Tell us a little bit more about that organic growth.
Yeah, I mean, through and through, we are an operational centric company. We in our home office exist for supporting our restaurants. And I'm sure you'll hear a lot of other restaurant brands say that, but you might find organizations that are more marketing led, and that's not the case. And I think it comes from the fact that we've been so operator led with that tenure of leader I talked about for 40 years, and they've been here for so long, and they've just created a restaurant experience that's unmatched and just really genuinely different. And so our job is to continue to support them. So yes, I mean, it's really about focusing on the organization and making sure that everyone else besides our operations teams are spent supporting those that are running our restaurants, because if we take care of them, the customer experience and the freshness of the food and our customer satisfaction scores are going to follow. And we know that we're a high word of mouth brand. And so we're very lucky to be able to really deliver on that strategy.
Yeah, I think the experience speaks for itself. And, word of mouth and recommendation on Nextdoor, at least over 70% of our conversations is just around recommendations. Where's the best babysitter? Where can I go eat for breakfast today? So we know that if you are able to build that experience for your neighbors going to talk to other people, and they're going to want to drive people into those restaurants and build the same memories.
And I'll give you one other example of how we live that. Is we actually, for anyone that leaves our restaurants, about 2 hours after you leave our restaurant, we ping you a 1-question survey. And we ask how likely you are, based on your experience, to recommend us to a friend. And our organization kind of lives around that number, because it comes back to the idea that we know that if you organically found and discovered First Watch, you're going to be so delighted. And if we do a good job of running our restaurants and maintaining that restaurant experience, you're going to leave and want to talk to a friend, to a neighbor, to a family member about us. And so it's just an example of that number, that metric. It is just a number, but it also symbolizes everything we talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you're engaging with your customer feedback and making sure that, like you mentioned, when you build out a new local store, it's about what have we learned from previous stores? What have we learned from our previous customers? And how can we integrate that to make it an even better experience for the next one?
Completely.
Great. So I think it's Q&A time. Let me go ahead and just check if there's anything on here. I don't see any questions in here. So I guess I can just end it with, is there anything else about First Watch that you want the viewers to know today?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground. Like I said, if you haven't been to a First Watch, you go to our website or go to our Instagram. Like, we try to really bring the freshness to life. And so if you're not in one of those 28 states, we'll be there soon. And really appreciate being able to share our story.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe your first location is in Pacific Grove in California. Is that correct?
So actually, and ironically, I talked about Chef Shane. He's actually there. It's not affiliated with First Watch anymore. It's actually called First Awakenings. And it's still there. And a lot of the menu items that were on earlier, or even kind of on our menu inspiration today, are still there. And just today, he is there visiting it. But yeah, it was in Pacific Grove, California. But then the First Watch was here in Sarasota, Florida, and is still a great restaurant today. So
great. Well, it's on my bucket list when I'm in Florida. So I really appreciate your time today. It was great to just learn more about you, learn more about what First Watch is doing. And I hope everyone who's listening make an effort to go to First Watch.
Thanks so much, Tori. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate your time too, Matt.
Thanks to you both for joining us. And Matt, I was excited to know that I'm in one of the states that has one.
And you didn't know who we were, right?
I didn't. It's about a 90-minute drive, but it counts.
It definitely sounds worth it.
I have friends who live near there. It's gonna have to happen.
Awesome. Where do you live, just so I know?
I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin, and there's one in Mequon.
Very cool. Well, look, we did our job here. We introduced one more person.
There we go.
All right.
Thank you both for joining us today. It was a great chat, and I'm going to obviously steal the I can't pronounce it, but I'm going to steal your Instagrammatization word.
Cool.
I think we need to make that happen.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. And then next up, we've got our next speaker is Jonathan Roman, the Senior Director of Marketing, Data, and Technology Operations of Chime. And he's gonna be moderated with Devin Craig, the Head of Product Marketing at Quad. So let's welcome up our next folks here. Oh, and we do have, just if Matt's still listening, we do have someone in the chat mentioned they were at the Scottsdale and Central PA location. So that is great to see. We'll just give it a quick second here for Jonathan and Devin. Oh, I see you there, Devin. We'll get you added in just a quick second. All right, we had a minor technical difficulty there, but we're back in the swing, and we have Jonathan Roman and Devin Craig joining us. Welcome, Jonathan and Devin.
There we go.
There they are.
How you doing, Carrie?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Doing good. It's like the right level of caffeination today.
Oh, that is like a rainbow. If you can find that, it's just the best. I'm either 2 over or 2 under for sure.
I'm usually chronically over caffeinated. It's a good day. My brain
is good.
My brain is matching like the words that are coming out of my mouth. So
I love it. I will let you two take it away. I do have to say, Devin, I adore your glasses.
Fabulous. Oh, thank you so much. They're functional too, so that's definitely a win.
Better.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you for teeing everything up, Carrie. I really appreciate it. And then Jonathan, it's so good to see you again. I'm glad you hit the mark on the caffeine. It's a sweet spot to be.
Yeah, awesome to be here. I'm really excited about our conversation. The perfect caffeination is just a bonus, but
fabulous. Well, I'd love to set the table a bit and just give folks an opportunity to get to know you. So if you want to let us know a bit more about who you are, what you do, something about Chime, I think that'd be great.
Sure. So I'm John Roman. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing Technology over at Chime. Really exciting role I took on here just because this was a role that did not exist before I joined. So I had the great opportunity to join, coming formerly from electronic arts. And then I had a little bit of time at SiriusXM before this amazing opportunity came up that I couldn't say no to. So kind of building a new functional organization within marketing that just supports all of the data and technology use, across all marketing channels. So it's been been fast and furious for the past few months, but we're starting to see the team come together and just kind of tackling some of those initiatives over at Chime that are allowing our marketers to, enter the next phase of the crawl, walk, run approach to different channel initiation with consumers. So that's kind of right now.
That's perfect. And we had such a beautiful conversation. I think it was 2 weeks ago, really coming together around how we wanted to craft this talk. And I think we each sit at a unique intersection. Just to introduce myself as well, my name's Devin Craig. I'm the head of product marketing for Quad, and Quad is a marketing experience agency. And what we're really looking to do is continue to innovate in the marketing space and bring an experience for our clients to help them drive success for their business, given all the different moving pieces we're seeing in the landscape today. Quad is a historically scrappy print startup that over the past 50 years has really evolved. And then I love where you're coming in from Chime, which is very much technology focused. To have that kind of juxtaposition coming together around what's innovative in marketing right now, I think is going to be really interesting. So I'm excited to be able to dig in with you there. So I know we talked about a few different things and we wanted to start with people. So I think people inherently are the heartbeat of any organization, and key to success. So I think I would love to hear, as you talked about your team and building and creating this space at Chime, how do you get incredible talent? How do you not only get them bought in, but how do you keep them?
Yeah, I say it has been instrumentally important to keep in touch with people that I've worked with over the years that have just been amazing, folk on my team, amazing leaders, amazing doers in organizations that really have a great technical capacity. So first things first, I'd say, always keep in contact with those folk that you've worked with that are just like great employees in general. You never know when there's going to be another opportunity that pops up where you may want to bring them into an organization or vice versa. They may want to bring you into an organization. And it helps clear some of the uncertainty of hiring brand new candidates, that you've never worked with before, just because some people are very good at kind of interviewing, but then, I think we've all been through this to some degree, probably at some point in our career. You bring on somebody and then it turns out, oh, they're actually not as great as maybe they seem during the interview process. So it's always great to just keep those relationships alive, check in on folk, even if you don't need anything from them, especially, if you had a lot of experiences together, because that is so important and has been so helpful for me personally in terms of building up a new team, not having to start completely from scratch. And then also I would say just like examine how you're interviewing. I know there's been a lot of changes for those brand new candidates, over the course of the pandemic in terms of how we operate an interview, right? We're seeing a lot of feedback from candidates and very qualified candidates too. So it's something that you want to really listen to and adapt your hiring strategies for, that they don't want to do like 8 or 9 different rounds of interviews anymore. It's exhausting. Like put yourself in the perspective of those candidates that have really been searching for that perfect role. Maybe they've been laid off from, an organization. Maybe they're just looking for something, the next step in their career. But a lot of talented folk, they're saying enough's enough. We don't want to go through 9 rounds of interviews. We don't want to go through lengthy presentations and stuff like that. So really working with your people teams to understand, what is the threshold? What is an acceptable amount of parts of the interview process? Are you doing panel interviews when it's appropriate to kind of combine those conversations? Just to make that experience better for candidates, because it really is a crazy time right now, and things are changing. Yeah,
absolutely. We're definitely seeing it's a job seekers market. There's mass exodus of people leaving roles in which they weren't satisfied, and I think we're going to get into this a little bit later when we talk about millennials versus Gen Z and brand loyalty and affinity. So did you see any significant shifts in pandemic? I'd love it if there are any other kind of through lines you could kind of parse out for us. And then how do you walk the talk? It's one thing to present as an organization with this incredible culture and, unlimited PTO and all these different things. But when it comes down to it, you get someone inside the organization. How do you ensure that you and your company really embody what it is you're sharing externally to the public?
Yeah, I think those great benefits and kind of the company messages, those are great preliminary draws. But, we've really been seeing an influx of candidates that are more passionate about their direct managers because they've been burned so many times in the past by, the great promise of an amazing organization. But then at the end of the day, you're not going to have a great experience and you're really not going to have a really good team without leaders that are empathetic. I think this is something that has been fascinating to watch too, just kind of a shift in empathetic leadership, just in general. That's kind of, we're moving into this era of just being more, it's less about demanding work from our employees and understanding them as people, and really shifting the mindset to be like, how can I help you grow just as you're helping the organization reach a place that it needs to be? So I think empathy has become more and more important, and then good leadership on top of just promoting your business. What are the core values? What are the perks? And then of course, like flexibility, working remote, right? Like we're seeing this massive upshift for people they like the flexibility. They like not having to come into offices every day. Depending on where you live in relation to any office, that's a lot of that could potentially be a lot of hours of your day that you could be spending, more valuable places. And that doesn't always mean working. That means, spending time with family, especially those of you with actual children and pets that you're raising. So we're seeing a lot of just, to your point, it's a shift in the power of, we have a lot of talented folk that are really raising their voices, making demands. And I think it's all for the best. I think, this is benefiting everybody. And then it's also kind of creating a change in perception of, I think before the pandemic, there was a lot of emphasis on finding quality candidates that were near specific office locations. And then when we quickly went into, I was over at Electronic Arts at the time, when we went into the pandemic and I had to hire up quite a few members of the team, it almost became nice to broaden that out. We knew we were going to be working remotely for quite a while, maybe permanently. So not focusing on like, just folk in this specific area. We can now broaden that out to include the larger United States and just focus on the quality of candidates. So so many things have changed, and it's been quite a shift, but I think hopefully everybody's kind of getting to a place where they're starting to embrace it. And then your people practices internally are also keeping an eye on what candidates are wanting, what they're needing. Just general sentiment of your current employees is very important as well to retain that talent. But lots of things going on. So
absolutely. And I'd say, in regards to a two-way conversation with employees, making sure that they're happy and connected, whether they be remote, in person, or hybrid. Everything's obviously constantly in flux right now, given the nature of the world in which we live. How do you ingest that feedback and actually action on it? How do you take what people are saying, good, bad, and everything in between, and then integrate that into your daily practices of the business?
Yeah. First off, I'm going to start with some tips, just because I'm sure most organizations have some sort of cyclical survey that they send out to employees. But really, taking the time as people managers and talking to your teams about how to appropriately fill out these surveys. Without the right direction, sometimes folk will tend to go in and they'll give scores that could be good scores or bad scores. But what's most important is usually a lot of these surveys have the written response area where you can supplement, like, why did you give that score? That is super important. And I cannot tell you how many times, without that sort of direction and going to teams and saying, hey, don't just fill out the survey from a scoring perspective, give us that feedback, because we're not going to know what to do. We're not going to be able to pass along information if you just give something a bad score and don't put the context behind that. So I think formulating the right questions, working with your people teams to do that, and then making sure you have both company-wide surveys, but then team-specific surveys, because there's micro issues and there's macro issues that are part of a larger organization. So making sure you have the right surveys, and then making sure you're encouraging everybody to provide the right level of feedback to actually make that actionable and make change internally is super important.
I love that. And also celebrating the culture of giving feedback. I think it's such a critical business function that often can fall to the wayside, especially as we're busy trying to be productive, hit business goals, but maintaining the spirit of feedback within the context of the inner organization to have that two-way conversation and have people feel a part of is so important.
Yeah.
But I think you perfectly teed up our next talking point and segue, which is actually getting into more of the marketing data and analytics, because what marketer doesn't love a good survey? So I think that's a really fun place to shift, where we can start talking about, what are we seeing in the landscape today? How are we utilizing tools like survey data and all this information in the time of technology to really inform the ways in which we approach our consumers?
Yeah, we're seeing a massive shift there too, right? Like along with the pandemic, kind of establishing some different cadences and how we're interacting with consumers. There's also an extreme shift in data availability that's been ongoing for the past few years, right? So it's been kind of this slowly creeping in challenge for a lot of major organizations, especially marketing organizations, to figure out how to provide actionable insights with less data available, less user level data available. So really working with different tools and platforms that from a legacy perspective are now in a little bit of a tricky place because they were heavily cookie reliant and maybe don't have the best action plan to kind of help with measurement, attribution, optimization in like the new world order, and kind of adapting themselves to lean more into projected data sets, without that core hard set data or cookie availability is super important. I've always made it a practice whenever I'm entering into a new organization to kind of assess the tech stack, see where we are, take a look at all of the tools. Is there kind of tools that are duplicative in nature? Are these tools providing and these vendors providing great roadmaps that are talking about some of our core issues surrounding data availability? What's the plan? And then looking for vendors to be really proactive. So like we're not constantly having to go to them and being like, hey, we're a little nervous. What's going on with this thing that we got in the past that probably is going away. So I think it's super important to think about your tech stack, think about some of the major challenges today, and then just make sure you're holding your vendors and your partners accountable is super, super important. And then like internal education, like some teams don't know from a technical perspective what's happening. So trying to speak to marketers in a way that they understand, hey, what you were doing in the past, how you were measuring is changing. Here's what's going on. And then here's what we're doing to circumvent some of those challenges in partnership with some of our technology vendors and some of our just overall relationships is a great place to start.
I'd love to unpack that a bit more too and go deeper in what you were talking about, the key points and what you're seeing shifting today. So for anyone who may not know, what would you say the key trends you're seeing are, and how is it significantly changing so marketers can be cognizant of this moment?
Yeah, so there's still continued questioning, and I'm seeing a lot of organizations just struggling with attribution in general, because a lot of times there's still reliance on some vendors that maybe worked really well in the past that aren't working as well in today's day and age. Kind of to my earlier comment, like maybe not adapting in a way that is sustainable. So I think one thing to take a look at is really, is attribution feasible? Is it working in the way that you're running it today? I've never been shy of recommending, like when as an organizational leader, like you don't know specifically what the next steps or the answer is at the moment, look into consultancies, look into different resources externally that can really help you with that you can invite in and just kind of like sit down with them. There's no shame in that, right? Like not everybody knows the answers. So taking a look at that, talking to the right vendors, and then just kind of thinking about ways to shift your allocation, MMM is still very much viable. So I've seen a lot of brands that are just kind of like moving away from attribution in certain key shapes or forms, leaning more into MMM, testing more into incrementality. That's been kind of a huge thing for different brands to test if different channels or media spend allocation is working. So I think there's a shift away from maybe like all-inclusive one-stop shop measurement and analytics and attribution platforms in a larger spread to just key solutions, fragmented solutions that help with specific challenges that you're experiencing cross-channel due to the limited reliance on data we have these days.
The pressure of necessity. I love hearing that as a through line for what you were just saying. And one thing, it just with the organization I'm working, one of the core values is to urgently innovate. And I think that is such a beautiful thing to keep at the forefront of any type of marketing organization. In your experience and career working with, say, more traditional companies and brands versus more startup, maybe newer stage companies and brands, have you seen an embrace in one space versus the next? And how do you kind of coach and counsel organizations that may be a bit more dug in, for lack of a better word, for being scared? Because there's a lot changing. Traditional marketing tactics may not necessarily apply. And I think you touched on that briefly. So if you can unpack that even more, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I've seen this more with larger organizations, just like global organizations that have like really legacy kind of embedded media organizations and things like that. This extreme pressure to like provide insights and to explain the value of different channels to the organization in ways that are not necessarily super possible anymore. So I think like fundamentally for business leaders, just because we're in an influx of the way that we're able to measure certain, let's say like mid-funnel channels are especially challenging, to not just write them off because, you're not able to actually measure it against other parts of the business or other tactics that do have a little bit more information flowing in. And that's where something like incrementality can be really beneficial in kind of shifting the perception of how we gauge success for different experiments. Experimentation is also super important to test into new different like marketing partnerships or even media strategies, allocations of budgets, media types, so different types of creative testing into that. I think that's tremendously important. But I've seen that being a little bit more of a struggle for larger organizations. A lot of the smaller organizations just being able to be a little bit more agile and nimble. I think because you're evangelizing, kind of differentiating methods of measurement and the new age of measurement and kind of some of these challenges, it's a little bit easier to disseminate that across different marketing channels and then like, working with your more technical data engineering teams and marketing analytics teams. So personally, I've experienced a little bit more of a challenge, in those bigger orgs than somebody that's in a little bit of more of a growth phase like Chime. So it's been a little bit of a nicer time here for sure.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And, I think upon approach, were there any specific blind spots you were able to recognize and then offer up, strategy around that you've seen a return on investment for when it comes to Chime or any of your past experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say this is kind of goes for everybody in general. There is often a large, effort or consensus to try to bring in a lot of tooling or to build stuff internally to circumvent challenges without actually taking a step back and assessing the quality of your foundational data. So I think that is terrifically fascinating. I feel like we could dedicate a whole, hour-long session or more session to talking about data quality and how important it is to have the right folk managing and maintaining your data before you start onboarding all of these shiny new tools that are supposedly supposed to help circumvent some of these challenges. Because what you'll often find is you go through all the effort of doing the RFIs, assessing and finding the perfect vendor. You bring them in and then you quickly realize if you haven't done that previous step and put those foundational fixes in place, this doesn't really work unless we do all of this fixing of our backend data, or we're not getting the value we thought we would because our data is not in a place that works well with this specific platform. So that is huge. And I think, that's something that I learned very quickly over the years that is just tremendously important. Working with the right teams, understanding who your technical kind of owners of marketing data and just like foundational and core first party data across the organization, where that lives. Set up regular time with them, get to learn how they're managing things, and then provide those recommendations and help them build up their team to better support your marketing org. Because those teams are not always experienced. They're experienced in working with data from a foundational perspective, core data to the organization, but marketing is often a completely different kind of ecosystem. So finding those right experts to manage that and working with them to onboard new technology is extremely important.
And I think onboarding is a really key piece too, because it's like, how do we unsilo these organizations and make sure the right hand's talking to the left? So there is that absolute utilization of the data because there's so much information to be gleaned. But again, if everything's not operating at its full capacity, inevitably you're going to find a problem or a challenge.
Absolutely, yeah. Or the results in your long drawn MMM project or your MTA project that you're attempting to initiate, the results are going to be bad. And then, you're going to have to redo it or take a couple of steps back. Meanwhile, you've paid for a platform that can sometimes be millions of dollars, and then you're wasting a significant amount of spend just trying to figure things out along the way. So, yeah, that goes back to the consultancies too. If you don't feel confident in what you're doing in an organization, go with a consultancy just for peace of mind and to make sure you're setting things up the best way possible, not only for the moment, but you want to build that foundational that supports foundational infrastructure that supports the business, like moving forward into the future, and then bringing back all these challenges we're having right now with data privacy regulation, availability of data, working within mobile environments where we're getting quite randomized and fragmented data sets available to showcase the value of certain marketing tactics. Pulling that all together and creating that unified strategy on how you're handling that today, and then how you're educating the larger organization about what's going on and why we're not measuring the same way we were able to measure, let's say 5 or 10 years ago.
Absolutely. And I think what you speak to too comes back to really solid planning phases. There's so much that has to happen in advance of anything external. It's having the right time to plan and to coordinate and to integrate and then execute, which inevitably will yield the better result on the back end. So you're not scrambling and then seeing that waste of money, not usable data, and all the kind of problematic things on the other side that end up causing a lot of challenge and loss, time, money, efficacy. Now I'd love to shift into more of the fun things. We've talked about kind of the back end stuff, the internal components. I would love to talk about how we take this data and information and inform it in the ways in which we show up in the world on different technology platforms. So I know one of the things we were talking about in particular, with so many different options to be visible for an organization, let's get into the TikToks, and all the different platforms in which we're seeing people live, eat, and breathe, and how companies can be effective in being very mindful in how they choose to show up in those different spaces.
Sure.
Yeah.
Where to start with that?
I know it's so broad.
There's so much to talk about. I'll speak about it a little bit from what I've noticed over the years as these different platforms become more mature. It's been great to see somebody like a TikTok that there was a lot of hesitation when they first entered the scene, back when they were called Musical.ly, and then they kind of shifted over to the TikTok branding. A lot of marketers were skeptical about the use of that platform at first. They didn't understand it. It was just like weird, funny dances. Like, how does that kind of come back to our brand? How is that going to be effective? And then seeing that platform develop over the years and really start kind of expanding both what kind of content was available on that platform, seeing the rise of micro content, seeing the sheer amount of downloads and audiences that it was pulling in, and then seeing their infrastructure evolve to support marketing organizations traditionally, just like how we work with Facebook, your Facebooks and your Googles of the world, from a measurement, from a first-party data use, like ingesting first-party data and targeting customers. So it's really great to see kind of where that is now, and then seeing how many brands are embracing kind of platforms like TikTok. I also did a talk on the metaverse a couple of weeks ago. So like even new and emerging kind of entertainment ecosystems like that, like understanding what that is, getting into it and understanding it before it becomes mainstream, right? You're going to definitely save a ton of dollars on CPMs and just the overall costs if you're getting into the hot new emerging platform earlier than, when everybody figures out like, oh, this is a great place for us to be and to spend our media dollars. But at the same time, you want to be cautious, right? You want to make sure that you're not pumping, millions of dollars into something that maybe isn't clearly, understood and how it's going to provide value to the business. So I would say always be curious, make sure you're getting into those new and emerging areas. And then just really, when it comes to your media mix, just like kind of taking a look at where you're seeing effectiveness for different demographics. Who are you trying to target? Where do you want to target them on? And then how are you adapting your content to fit that ecosystem? There have been a lot of, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, there have been a lot of moments where I've just been on social media and you'll see when somebody takes something that was maybe meant for Instagram and they'll put it in an environment that was, they'll just kind of repurpose that ad and put it somewhere else. And it will say something like swipe up for more information. But on the app, the platform that they put that, that creative on, swiping up doesn't do anything. They just repurposed it and kind of quickly threw it into there. So really taking a look at, you could take the same foundational creative component, but how are you adapting that to where it's living? And then your custom audiences, which you're trying to target, I think is very.
Yes, 100%. And I mean, I'll speak to what you just spoke to. For me, and I'm judgmental, I'm just going to own it. When I see that on a platform that someone just repurposed without the mindfulness to make sure that it's fully fit for that individual platform, I'm almost, I don't want to say dismissive, but there's a moment where I'm just like, they don't care, and I think that's really important. As you go to be in each space, because there is no one size fits all. Everything is so bespoke and unique and different that there's a different conversation, a different approach, a different visual across this mix, And also, I think one thing that's important too when we work, not only with our own organizations, but other companies as well, is does it make sense to be here? And if so, what does that mean? Because I've seen a lot of people quickly try to adapt to have stake in these new and emerging platforms. However, they may not be the right fit, or their content strategy may need to be, slightly refreshed to have it feel relevant and meaningful. Because otherwise you're just kind of consuming airtime for the sake of it. And I don't know that drives value. So when you talk about, companies embracing their media mix and making sure that they're optimizing, because every dollar today counts, making sure that it's the best space for them to be that's going to elicit the response that they're really looking for.
Yeah. And I think TikTok is just to keep throwing that out there. Like, I love TikTok so much just from I feel like it got me through the pandemic. Micro content is awesome. And I love the sheer amount of different types of folk that create content on that platform. It's amazing. Where brands just are like, if as a user, if I notice something is an ad within the first like 1 or 2 seconds, you just scroll away from it and you go back to what you wanted, which was content. You wanted your funny content or your educational content, whatever you were looking for. So I think like definitely examining channels like that and developing something that's entertaining that I'm going to watch. I'm always surprised when I get through a complete TikTok video and then I look down and I'm like, oh, this is a sponsored ad. Like, I didn't even realize that because this just seemed like some form of content. Maybe there was an embedded product in that I didn't notice. Those are the ones that are just so amazing. And I think that's kind of a good example of how you adapt content for TikTok versus different, maybe social platforms that can be more direct to the point and like familiar from like an advertising perspective. That's really, really important.
Agreed. And I think content's king. And I love the idea of storytelling, creating really beautiful content that elicits a response via story. I've got a quick tangent. I was doing tons of research on, downtime opportunity. And there's this particular article from Ad Age, and it was talking about Square, which initially started off to support small business. And I had seen this, they almost created a movie about this movie theater closing down in Iowa. And it's all about the community bolstering around this movie theater. I hadn't the faintest idea it had anything to do with Square until the closing credits, but it was such a compelling piece of content. I probably watched it 7 years ago, and I still speak about it to this day. So I think that, what you're saying about the quality of the content and having it feel authentic and real and not overly salesy is so important, because people are smart, especially as younger consumers age into certain markets. They've been marketed to their entire lives, and they're so savvy. They can almost smell it in the water, if they're trying to be sold to, and then the opportunity is lost.
Yeah. Oh, and that's another thing too, just like the agility of specific brands to get onto meme trends, right? So I see a lot of brands embracing memes or jokes or kind of moments that are happening, whether it be in politics or whether it be in entertainment, like certain things that are happening in the moment. The lifespan of a lot of those things is very short. So understanding when the moment has gone, right, to avoid kind of submitting something or putting out content into the world that's already not relevant after maybe like a week or maybe even after like a few days. So making sure you have an established team that is really keeping their kind of the pulse of what's going on, and just building out foundational infrastructure to release content extremely fast in certain areas when you don't necessarily have weeks or months to put something together to ride this wave in the moment, especially if it directly synergizes with your brand specifically. So there are some great examples of brands that are doing that in a day-to-day capacity. And when you have a brand that doesn't do that, they're kind of late to the party. They try to send out a joke that has already expired. Sometimes there's like a negative backlash from the community, and you'll get made fun of as a brand because you're not with it. You gotta be quick.
Yes, 100%. If you were to break it out in a percentage based on your experience, what percentage would you say is proper planning, and what percentage would you say is having the ability to be culturally responsive in the moment to really incorporate the type of content we're talking about? Because it is so fast, it is so quick, and inherently has to be responsive.
I think there's kind of automated workflows you can set up just to make sure that these things go fast. You still need the appropriate amount of approvals. Here's the challenge as well. When you are working that quickly to create a piece of content to catch on to a wave of something that's happening in the moment that you need to quickly respond to, there's also the added risk, and we've seen this as well, as kind of brands being culturally deaf, and it winds up backfiring because maybe they didn't understand the joke to its full nature, and they just kind of released something, and then it had more nefarious backgrounds, or they were commenting on something politically in the moment that just was very tone deaf or insensitive, and then you see major backlash from that. So I think having the right folk queued up and making sure that there is a team that is kind of built to do this rapid fire of content from a percentage perspective, I think it will change over the course of time. Initially, it should be way more focused on process and making sure that, this thing that you're building has all the appropriate touch points. And then over time, you want to figure out how to automate that. Key areas where things are getting caught up before you're able to publish, like how can you make those things faster? What people do you need to have in the room to make those decisions more quickly? And then when in doubt, I always thought this back to like ERG conversations, and then consultancies is another good way. Ask those internally if it's dealing with sensitive topics or issues that you don't feel confident releasing that content out. One, there's probably a reason. If you have this inkling that like, oh, this doesn't quite sit right, get a second opinion, talk to your teams internally. If it is something specific to, the political climate or issues that are going on, talk to your ERGs internally, ask different people you're working with to like, take a look at this, give me any feedback. Or you can leverage consultancies to help you with that as well. Because that's also an area that's a little dangerous, right? You don't want to send out into the world that will come back to reflect negatively on the overall brand.
Yes. And I think even just coming out of Pride Month, Pride community is very important to both of us. Being able to bear witness to those that feel compelled to participate, regardless of the deeper history, the context, and the why, you can sense that, and again, for me, it's almost like a moment of pause where I'm like, whereas when I see people really mindfully engaging, having done the homework and having really planned in a meaningful way to elicit a dialogue, because ultimately we're people, right? We're playing on emotions. We're playing on an emotional response that elicits a reaction to then engage. How can we make sure that that's at the heart of what we're doing? Because we're real people with emotions and feelings dealing in a very intricate world that's now very social in nature digitally, which is wild. I know one of the things we wanted to talk about too is what we're seeing with these channels evolving. We'll get into Gen Z and millennials in just a bit, but I would love to hear from you what channels and platforms you're seeing evolve and maybe become less relevant and harder to measure.
Ooh. So sorry, you want to know what channels are more relevant, but then also which ones are...
I mean, maybe the question's inextricably connected, because as we see millennials age, obviously baby boomers age, Gen Z is coming into the mix. Each has a different preference. I can say my experience with Gen Z folks and the need for that video content consumption, whether it be my niece, where I'm like trying to get her to cross the street without watching TikTok. But the ways in which they engage with social versus maybe my parents' generation that are very still, I've got a Facebook birthday message, let me check my event invite. It's just different, right? So I'd love to hear from you as you see, again, ages shift, people age, new age groups coming into the space of being the consumer with purchasing power. What platforms are you seeing either evolve and change and adapt? Are there any in particular you've seen feel less relevant? And what are your recommendations for the best places to be? And then I'd love to get more into the Gen Z versus millennial conversation.
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating topic of conversation because, I was having a conversation with some coworkers, I think it was the day before yesterday, and the notion of like banner ads came up, and somebody jokingly was like, what's a banner ad? And I think about the way that I grew up, on the earlier days of the internet and how banner ads were always common. Maybe they were effective at a certain point, just those ads, even the mastheaders at the top, the side ads. But over time, kind of the way our brains evolved was just to ignore that stuff, right? So it's kind of like you browsing the web for years and years and years, and then it really takes something big to capture your attention on formats like that. So we saw kind of the uprise of video advertising. As we're consuming more video content, we're in a place where we're watching the content, and then maybe sometimes there'll be an ad in front of it, and then that kind of involved a little bit more in terms of brand deals within specific content that we're watching the day-to-day. So it's not just an ad that's being thrown at us, the product is integrated into the actual content we're consuming. And then that goes back to like specific curated content for your different age groups. Where are you kind of promoting that? Where are you serving that content? How long is it? Attention spans definitely vary, from person to person and generation to generation. So, obviously going back to TikTok, big rise of TikTok, seeing a lot of content on there. Now with them allowing longer form content too, that's been interesting to see. So it's no longer, hey, you have to get your message through in 15 seconds. Now you have multiple minutes you want to create some sort of piece of content or story. Brand ambassadors are also really great to kind of throw in. One of the things I love about that as well, not to go off on too much of a tangent, is when there are the right brand ambassadors that brands are choosing to incorporate, their product into a piece of content that somebody is making maybe somebody that's an up and coming comedian and things like that, where they just like really integrate the product into their skit or their piece of content in a way that's super entertaining or makes you actually want to go out and buy something.
Yes.
So TikTok is huge. I think there are different ways to kind of get your audience members to go into different environments. So like Twitter is obviously great for a lot of meme culture, to comment back with other brands. I think millennials love that. Like what we're seeing with Wendy's, I think is really funny. Just like giving these mascots personalities. I think that's hilarious. And then just seeing these brands engage with one another in a way that sometimes is a little cheeky. You know, they're throwing light punches at each other, things like that. They're commenting on each other's posts. That's awesome. And then Facebook is definitely still a place where there's more of a back and forth conversation happening, you know, especially with some of the older generations that are still kind of consuming content on Facebook, and they're going there instead of, you know, to talk about complaints. This is a great place to get feedback on specific products or messaging, right? Like folk that are going to write really detailed commentary, making sure that like if they're unhappy with a specific feature or a specific product in general, like you have a source to collect that and then build it into making a better product, take that feedback back, or address their issues, have them, you know, report that to the team internally to make sure that all of their needs are getting met. So I'm trying to think if there's, I mean, going back to banner ads, maybe like a little bit of traditional programmatic. We're definitely seeing brands move away from, you know, this historical banner-based ads and more into video content. So yeah, lots of shifts happening. Emerging platforms are coming out. And then I think one thing I'll touch on is just like going back to the whole metaverse conversation, because a lot of people are still very skeptical about that.
Yes.
It's right to be, right? Like, I think one thing to watch out for there is just understand it for now. I don't think anybody's going to go and say like, you should absolutely, you know, have a deal in the sandbox and create a world for your product if it doesn't make sense. But know what's happening, because there will be a point where the barrier to entry into something like the metaverse or those sort of digital experiences becomes so much easier for, you know, folk to just jump into. Right now, there's like a pretty big barrier of entry. You have to have, you know, the right kind of signups to different platforms. In certain cases with VR experiences, you have to have those headsets. So just keeping tabs on things like that and understanding when's a good moment to actually start considering it for your brand is extremely important.
And I love everything you said. I think as marketers, we're perpetual students. Coming in with that beginner's mindset and always staying curious is what we're seeing is so important. How would you say, you know, embracing all this change versus perhaps a fear and resistance can impact your ability to properly market? Have you seen, do you have any examples to share in particular that could kind of highlight how truly embracing these new technologies wholeheartedly has really served to support future marketing outcomes?
Yeah, so on the tech side, you have more like media activation or more just like pure play ad and marketing technology?
You know, I think it's wherever you want to take it. I'll keep it broad.
Well, something that's that I'll talk about that's actually been a really cool result of data privacy regulation and kind of the change in which we leverage our data and our partnerships with other organizations when leveraging data. Not to say this is being done at Chime, but just in general, other organizations I've worked with in the past. Things like data clean rooms. We have a lot of our clean housing. We have a lot of companies, data-related marketing, analytics, attribution, audience segmentation platforms that are allowing more robust like data clean room integrations, where they're building them out themselves to allow different brands that I think historically, you know, brands are always very, or should be very safeguarded against sharing their first party data with other brands, right? Like, you know, you don't want to give your branded data. You don't want to just hand over a file of all your customers, all of their attributes to another organization, whether they're competitors of yours or not. That's always like, you never know what people are going to do. But now with the rise of clean housing, because, and this was predominantly a factor of GDPR, we have kind of a lot of cool mechanisms that are being built where you can share your data with other organizations and for insights, for targeting, without actually releasing your first party data in its raw format to these organizations. So if you think about something like in Electronic Arts, they have a lot of brand, big partnerships with sports franchises and things like that. Those are great opportunities to think about how are you leveraging, let's say like the NFL's data in a way that's meaningful to sell the next Madden that's coming out, or FIFA, or whatever, whatever's coming out, without the paranoia of releasing your data directly to these providers. And then also like the amount of additional insights you're able to garner if you have second parties sharing their data with you in some of these secured environments. I think historically it was always a very it's a very high risk, high reward decision to say, like, I'm going to try to share my data with this specific vendor, and then having to put a bunch of safeguards in place to make sure like they're not leveraging that for anything outside of what you agreed on when you're forming an agreement or a partnership with them. That's been really cool to see, and how it's broadening and opening up areas for more collaboration across different brands and garnering
Absolutely.
the sharing of data. I think that's been really cool to see.
Absolutely, because there's so many dots to be connected, and being able to have that approach, that mindset, I think it sets everyone up for success, because there's so many different ways we can integrate and partner. And I love the idea of us being able to come together in the spirit of that to utilize the information we have to market more effectively. So I think that was a really great thing to touch on. I think I would love to hear a little bit more about where you sit at Chime, specifically because you have a topic of conversation, finance, which historically may be more traditional in a sense, typically geared towards a older generation. Now, technology first, focused on more a millennial, younger audience. How has it been marrying those two things together? Because we're deeply involved when it comes to all things finance and personal lending at Quad. So I'm just so excited to talk about this particular intersection with you.
Yeah, I think product is key, right? Like making a product that is easily accessible, that is it has a low barrier of entry to come into, with minimal risk to the consumer to try it out and see if they like something. That's been tremendously valuable from a Chime perspective, and just constantly taking feedback on how we can make the actual app, the offerings, the platform, the features and capabilities, taking consumer feedback and really understanding like what is best for our consumers. That's been really, really valuable. Like the feedback, we do a lot of surveying and stuff like that as well, where we're garnering that information back, and then listening on our social medias, right? Like kind of aggregating all of this feedback and this data together to continuously build a best-in-class product that supports our consumers first, and making sure that, people being able to access their money at any given time, and some of the things that like we allow to do the early paycheck receipts and things like that. It's really important to make sure that we have a quality product that supports our consumer firsthand. So I think that's been really important, and that's been such a nice thing to come into Chime and hear how great, the product already was when I had joined, all of the great kind of innovative efforts coming down the pipeline. And then just that there's a lot of thought and consensus surrounding the consumer. Like it's not always about like what new feature can we enable, right now that our biggest competitors are potentially doing, but more of like, is this quality for the actual consumers that are using this app? Will it benefit them? Is it adding value to their financial journey? And starting from a place there before, just going wild and releasing all of these new features and capabilities. So that has been, it's an ongoing journey, as it is for a lot of these like new and emerging fintech companies, but it's been especially rewarding here.
I love that. Like speaking of value, I think that's so important, valuing people's time and creating the most seamless user experience top to bottom so that it feels intuitive and it adds value to someone's life, versus the opposite, where, if you have struggles with any type of technology, it's the opposite. It actually distracts. So I love what you guys are doing at Chime. And I also love when I saw all the different brand moments on your socials, because you're clearly so much more than just, technology when it comes to finance. There is a heart and soul that's been built around this company that's really compelling.
Educating our consumers is super important. So it's like kind of providing that value add of like, yes, we're promoting Chime as a product, but we're also giving you general advice that isn't necessarily only applicable to you using the service, of how you can, eliminate credit card debt, how you can consolidate debt into like a single source that makes it easier to pay off. And then just all of these tips surrounding savings. And I think our social team does an amazing job at making that, funny and entertaining. It's not just like, here's link like that you're going to fall asleep reading. Like the memification of a lot of this information, doing things like talking about account or debt consolidation as a burrito. I think stuff like that,
Yes.
little moments are amazing. And I know when I enjoy content like this and I'm laughing at it, I'm like, all right, somebody's doing something right, because, this is not only educational, kind of talks to the brand and the overall vibe of Chime, but then also provides, a little moment of entertainment in the mix as well.
100%. I love the little Usher Giphy that I was seeing earlier today. I think it's perfect. Now I totally lost my train of thought because I was just loving that so much when I saw it. So just a curious question, because I know Gen Z was born in a recession. Millennials were born in a boom. Finances and their relationship to money is completely different than, the counterparts we're seeing coming up behind them when being born in a recession, having a lot more mindfulness around money. But I love the mission that Chime's created, and I love the vision that's shared really around creating financial wellness. Can you speak towards having that mission and vision driven organization that speaks to these younger audiences to really bring them into the fold?
Yeah, I think it's kind of creating that unity surrounding, like, what are we trying to enable for you to make your financial success happen? And then just like providing that quality advice and guidance, and being almost in a way responsible for our consumers that we take on. We don't want you to do things that are going to put you in a place where you're creating additional risk to your finances, but rather kind of creating a safe environment that you can build your credit score, you can save, you can create a significant savings, and just overall make your financial journey go to a better place. So it's just like that, and adapting the content for different audiences and really listening to what their challenges and their perspectives are. It all goes back to that creation of content, right? And thinking about the consumer. So yeah.
I love it. I love it. And I want to be mindful of time because I know we're about at that moment, but I would love to just talk about the next big thing. Like, are there any things, like, I know how do brands get in on it, but are there any things you're kind of seeing on the horizon that would be really great for people to be mindful of?
Yeah, I would say copying is what is the phrase, copying is the best form of flattery. Look at those brands. They can be competitor brands of yours, or they can be just, what some of the larger, more successful brands in all of these spaces. See how they're interacting with new and emerging spaces, things like the metaverse, things with their use and their creation of content on TikTok. Anything else kind of up and coming, a lot of people are investing more in connected TV these days. It's been that way for the past few years, and then creating branded sponsorships with content creators, with major series, but then also smaller content creators. Just take a look around, see what everybody's doing, and then have those internal talks to see what your threshold for risk is. Dedicate budgets to testing that, like those budgets are going to be separate from your total media spend. They're kind of dedicated for the chance of failure. So that's okay, as long as we're learning from it. Just always be testing. That's all I can say. So take a look around, have those conversations, test into it, see if it works, and then determine if it's we're not at the right time to test into this, or if it's something that's just not viable from your brand, and maybe re-explore it in a few years when things are always changing. TikTok may be a completely different platform in the next 5 years than what it is today. You never know. So, I think that's really important.
100%. And I love even what you said about embracing failure, right? Because we learn the most from those moments of failure to then inform the ways in which we go forward. And even in the midst of what we're seeing right now, because I know there's the lingering, conversation around potential recession. However, now is the time to embrace the data, the testing, all the digital technology to really make sure that you maintain that level of visibility, and in the smartest way. So there is no lapse, no money wasted, and you can continue to improve regardless of the climate that we're in.
If your organization doesn't have comfort with failure, and especially like failure as a learning mechanism to make better decisions moving forward, you're never going to be able to take those risks that may actually lead to like really great rewards. So I think that's tremendously important as well.
100%, 100%. And on that note, I think that is such a beautiful place to pause. And Jonathan, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been incredible. Carrie, I just wanted to kick it to you. Do we have any questions, or was anything submitted, or
nothing
we can just keep
in the
ripping?
Q&A. We can get the hook out for you. But this was amazing. This was like unicorn level caffeination, Jonathan, and I think it's amazing. When you two want to come back and do that hour about data, call me. We'll make it happen. That would be amazing.
Anytime.
All right. Have a great one. Thanks so much. And we're going to bring in our next conversation. We have Derek Gaskins, the CMO of Yesway, and his moderator is Michael Kiernan, the head of Nextdoor Accelerate. Welcome, guys. And how's your coffee level? That's going to be our first question going forward, because where are you on the caffeine scale? Perfect. We'll give Derek another second here. There he is. All right, guys, take it away.
There he is. How you doing, Derek?
Pretty good. Was just getting promoted to panelist and getting my background and video and all my settings correct. So thank you. That prior session was definitely dynamic, and Carrie, caffeine level is pretty good right now. Just to get back to you.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to introduce everybody to Derek Gaskins. He's the CMO of Yesway. Yesway is one of the fastest growing convenience stores in the US. In the past 4 years, Derek has taken a footprint of just about 40 stores to 420 and growing across nearly a dozen states here in the US. My name is Mike Kiernan. Been in Nextdoor about 4 years, working in various roles across the ads business, primarily focused on partnering with high growth, emerging, disruptive brands. So I think to start off, Derek, based on our call last week, tell me where you are today.
Today, I'm actually in Fort Worth, Texas. So this is where our store support offices for Yesway are now based. And great opportunity because I'm able to meet with my entire merchandising and price book and many of my marketing team down here. And while here, we're having a series of top to tops and bringing in supplier partners and just planning for future growth.
Awesome. Yeah. Last week it was DC, maybe it was Boston, down in Texas.
Exactly.
And let's tell the audience what your path was to becoming the CMO at Yesway.
Certainly. So had a bit of a journey throughout, starting in grocery retail and then transitioning to convenience retail. And there were 4 companies along my 20 plus year journey that led me to where I am now with Yesway. Started with Giant Eagle back in Pittsburgh, a regional based supermarket operator, and was their director of marketing, and really claimed to fame, launched the Get-Go chain of convenience stores, GETGO, and got that stood up. And much like Yesway, it was high growth. We went from white paper concept to close to 200 stores in a little under 2 to 3 years, and spent about a decade there in Pittsburgh. And as Giant Eagle grew as a grocer, entered into new markets close to my hometown of Washington, D.C., down into Frederick, Maryland, and Hagerstown, and then grew westward through Cleveland and Columbus, Akron, Canton, and even further out towards Indianapolis and those markets. So really had my start within convenience retail, let's say grocery as well as convenience retail there. Then went to NACS as their VP of marketing and CMO. NACS is the National Association of Convenience Stores, but we actually call it NACS because it went global. And the goal was to provide global best practices to retailers as well as suppliers wanting to do business in a small format space. So had a wonderful opportunity to work with what I would consider the top brands globally, everyone from Waitrose to Sainsbury to Tesco, Carrefour, OXO, you name it, as well as the top brands in North America, and was navigating that very successfully, putting on the annual Big NAC show and other thought leadership type of global seminars and conferences. Took a leap of faith from there and went to a company called Max, Mid-Atlantic, convenience stores. That was my first foray with private equity backed venture that was rolling up some of the strategic assets from ExxonMobil all around my hometown. So it was the Washington, D.C., kind of south through Richmond to the Carolinas, and then north up through Baltimore to Pennsylvania and Delaware. And we had about 310 assets that we quickly rolled up and led the rebranding, remerchandising of that, and did a joint agreement with Couche-Tard and actually branded the backcourt, the stores, as Circle K. The forecourts were primarily Exxon, and rolled that up and then sold that to Energy Transfer Partners that was then later sold to 7-Eleven. After that was with Rudders and spent close to 6 years. Rudders is a central Pennsylvania-based, family-owned and operated. I believe they can trace the business back 11 generations now. And the land was deeded from William Penn's grandson to Andrew Rudder. And that became a dairy farm as well as a chain of convenience stores. And I always say Rudders has the best food service in all the space. They are inspirational as well as aspirational for many brands, still family owned and operated and head by Scott Hartman on the store and real estate side. And then Todd Rudder runs the dairy, and Tim Rudder is also involved with real estate. But their claim to fame is that they compete in what I consider to be the hottest bed of retail anywhere in the world, and that's Pennsylvania. They've now grown into Maryland and West Virginia and surrounding states, but Central PA being the core. And it's the hottest because they're competing with one of my former companies, Giant Eagle, with the Get-Go stores. They're competing against Sheetz, is also from Pennsylvania. They compete against Wawa, that's also from Pennsylvania, as well as Sunoco. And then you have new entrants that came in from bordering states like Quick Check in Jersey or Royal Farms in Maryland. And Rudders outpunches their weight class. They have about 80 plus stores and literally host people. When I was in NACS, for instance, I would work with Scott Hartman and coordinate and have retailers coming from as far as Australia and Japan because they wanted to see what Rudders was doing with their food service. And it was truly inspirational because it was restaurant quality in a fast, convenient setting and format. I'm talking about everything from crab cakes to lobster to, Angus beef burgers, you name it. And, it was a great opportunity at that time and made the transition. It's actually been 4 years and 1 month now from Rudders and joined Yesway. And Yesway is led by Tom Turkler. He's our CEO, and he was the founder of Brookwood Financial Partners. And Tom is a visionary genius. He saw and sees what others don't. And I think even with his Brookwood business, his claim to fame was the recession in 07 and 08. He saw it coming and he sold out of his real estate assets, and reluctantly clients were saying, why are you doing this? And he made a ton of money for them because he had that foresight of understanding the market fundamentals, and very quantitative guy, but also being able to temper that with his gut. And about 2 years prior to me joining Yesway, he conscientiously sought to get into the convenience industry and came up with the brand, came up with a strategy before he had stores or anything. And, the first time I talked to him, I was really just motivated by that, saying that someone that could be that thoughtful and purposeful and understand what I knew intuitively, that convenience retail is one of the best retail verticals and channels that there is, in good times and bad. We're relatively recession proof. We're certainly recession resilient. In inflationary times and the Great Recession, you look at 9/11, anytime that the channel, when you're celebratory, you're going to trade up within the channel. When you're being cost conscious and penny pinching and frugal, you're going to trade down from restaurants and grocery to the channel. And it's local, it's community based. And he got that. And not a lot of people, certainly that are not within the business, understand that. And as he was looking to build Yesway, I knew it was something that I wanted to be along and a part of that journey and help bring the vision to life. And, 4+ years later, we are well on our way.
That's awesome. I love how every stop of the way, by the way, you managed to create a stronger competitor that then future Derek has to go and compete with.
That's a good point.
And on the recession-proof thing, I guess good starting point here, because this is replacing the weather as everyone's favorite small talk. Are convenience stores COVID-proof? And how did you have to react to COVID, given you're a physical business? You're growing the business incredibly quickly 2 years ago. How'd you react to COVID, and what were some of the challenges you saw as a result?
COVID was nothing short of life-changing, personally as well as professionally. And I was fortunate that when COVID first started, there were some early signs. And, ironically, I was at a NACS Day on the Hill industry lobbying in Washington, D.C. So we were in the halls of the Hart Building and the Cannon House Building and lobbying members of Congress and the Senate on swipe fees and, labor and everything that's important to retailers. And let's say from that Monday through Thursday, it was a palpable shift. Monday we were shaking hands, meeting with senators. By Wednesday, it was, chicken elbow bumps or fist bumps. And by Thursday, it was DC is closed, everyone leave and return safely. And we were on flights. And so I'm flying back to Boston at this point. And our executive leadership team, we started to have daily meetings. And so we would meet at 7:30 or 8 a.m. Eastern time and just talk about the challenges. And I think two things became very clear. In times of disaster and crisis, I often say that the convenience channel, we fuel the heroes. So police, fire, EMS, if it's a natural disaster, a hurricane, fires in New Mexico, we fuel the people who are the first responders. And I don't just mean gasoline fuel or diesel fuel. I mean, yes, that's a piece, but I also mean, caffeine, going back to how Carrie started this, getting their coffee, getting water, getting food, getting nourishment. And we felt an obligation as an essential retail outlet, to maintain operations. So as the world started to close, I mean, if you think back to those days, restaurants, bars, sports arenas and venues, literally everything shut down. We were the only place open. So in some of those communities, I felt the challenge as the head of merchandising and head of marketing to keep the supply chain going. I had to be preemptive and proactive and use data, but also take some leaps of faith and say, do I want to buy a truckload of sanitizer? Do I want a truckload of bleach and some of these products that later became extremely scarce? And I was surrounded by a really good merchandising team, and we would discuss it. And leadership, Tom Turkler and team gave us his unending, do what you feel is necessary, anything. And that became how we were able to keep 365, 24/7 operations as things started to close. We made the right moves early on because we didn't look at it through a traditional business lens. We humanized it. And so, we talk about heroes. One of the things we started was hospitality heroes, where we referred to our internal team members who were trying to provide hospitality in a very challenging, scary time as the heroes that they are and were. And we incentivize them through positive reinforcement. I mean, right now, when you think back on that, it was such a culture clash and dynamic. And, I almost felt like a people scientist because I'm on a plane leaving Boston and how Massachusetts is treating COVID and how we were going through it was extremely different than if I got off a plane in Iowa or in South Dakota or in Texas or in Oklahoma, where we have stores and operations. And it was important for me to be present. And our operations leadership, we made it a mandate to get in the stores. If our offices are closed, it was a lonely trek. I would be on a plane sometimes. I mean, there's literally times I was the only person on a 747 jumbo jet going from Boston to, let's say, DFW. And it's the pilot and the crew and me, and you have masks on and you're terrified. And everyone is just like, how are you doing this? You have a death wish or anything? And it's no. I mean, if my people are working in the stores and risking their lives, I'm no different. And I'm only have a job because of what they're doing to sell and execute against the playbook and the merchandising marketing plans that we have. So this Hospitality Heroes was honestly a way to just reinforce, to be present. Some of it was just being there. I mean, I would show up in stores and riding with my operations leadership, and team members were crying. I mean, they were shocked. Like, I can't believe you're in the stores. This is radical. And part of it was we were armed actually with cash, and that was a positive reinforcement. And it was not the amount. It was the fact that we wanted to diffuse the situation that, hey, if we're going to mandate masks and we're going to say wear a mask, even if you're in a state that hasn't mandated it, because we have signs on the door that are encouraging and asking our customers to do so, we didn't want it to be punitive. It was, if I go to a store and our hospitality heroes are wearing a mask, wearing gloves, using a cleaning agent, wiping down the doors, greeting customers, wiping down the counters, the coffee bar, the fountain and dispensed areas, the common touch, that did a lot of things. It told our consumers that we were serious about cleanliness, and it gave them an affirmation that they could be comfortable coming here. It also showed that our people were not going to do or ask customers things to do that they wouldn't do. So whether it was the wearing of the mask or the cleaning, I think that diffused a lot of the overly politicized drama that was there in the early days. No one's going to make me do this, and no company can do this, and no state, I'm free, and I'm this. It made it about altruism and empathy. And we're doing this on behalf and for the benefit of our team members in the stores and our customers and the communities that we serve. The incentives and the positive reinforcement, made it fun. It literally gave my marketing, merchandising, and the operations teams, while we're doing our store checks, we could reward people. And I can think back to literally people welling up with tears. I actually tease Brian Ashburn. He's our head of operations for the Western Wing. And I've never seen him cry as much in those rides. And I actually cried too, because you would literally have team members saying, can I hug you? Can I touch you? I'm so touched by you being here. And that presence and that leadership was invaluable. And so while saying that it's COVID proof, there were some things that we were very blessed and very fortunate in. I was on the verge of resets, for instance, and typically you do your resets in the spring. COVID disrupted that. Fortunately, we didn't do the resets. And that was one of the smartest things I've ever done, because we had a plethora of grocery fill-in type of products. And when the world shuts down, people were living locally, they came in and they pantry loaded and they filled up. And we had everything from toilet paper to hand sanitizer to bleach to Lysol when no one else did. We also had bread, milk, and tortillas and eggs and things that people could cook a home cooked meal. And we also then had our food service program, the also world famous burritos and chimichangas. And the amount of consumers that reached out to us through social media and email and calls and leaving us feedback saying, thank you for being open when the world was closed. I hadn't had a hot meal in a month. Your stores were able to deliver that for me. It was huge. And so, everyone looks at it. No one wants to be perceived as profiting in a pandemic or anything along those lines. But to your question, Michael, the convenience channel overall did very well. And I would say in the face of, daunting odds where there were questions around, could you even continue to get fuel to sell it? Could you get the supply chain to keep going and maintain 24/7 operations? And we did. And I think it really speaks to the C in NACS, or the C in convenience also could mean community. because we take pride in being a part, in providing and meeting the needs of the communities where we are located and serving them. And from that aspect, COVID, I think, shone a very bright light on that. And as we cycled it, there's the business person in me would say, there's no way I'll be able to meet those numbers that we did in 2020. Remember, all bars and restaurants were closed. So the amount of beer, the amount of packaged beverages, the amount of grocery products that I sold is unprecedented. Well, in 2021, we were able to meet and exceed it. And it came in different forms, less pantry loading, more of the world starting to open back up, people moving around, and immediate consumption driving the consumer trips. And here we are again in 2022, about halfway through, and the convenience industry has collectively stepped up again. And if you look at state of the industry data or Nielsen or IRI data, other retail verticals and channels have struggled mightily. The growth of e-commerce has taken about 1/3 of grocery dollars away from that channel permanently. Meanwhile, convenience is the little engine that keeps going. And we have a lot of headwinds, but we are entrepreneurs at heart, we're innovators at heart, and we find different categories to be relevant. It may have been fuel 50 years ago, and then it became fill-in grocery, and then it became things like tobacco, then it became food service. All I know is that tomorrow it'll be something very different, but we will definitely innovate, evolve to meet the consumer's needs.
Yeah, going back to your point on leadership, there's like nothing more galvanizing to a team than show, don't tell. So you being on a plane, you visiting all your store locations, like I said, it sounds like it really galvanized the team. And then for them to spend extra time, if your retail employees to spend extra time in store, showing consumers, showing your community, that while you're still open, you're taking the pandemic and the proper precautions and everything seriously, I'm sure helped fuel the growth. And if you don't want to telegraph your strategy, you don't have to, but I am curious, we're starting to come out of it. There's still a lot of caution related to COVID, but how is your strategy evolving to sort of stay current with kind of current foot traffic patterns and how people are now thinking about convenience stores?
Yeah, I mean, certainly won't divulge any trade secrets. I think
Sure.
it's pretty basic, right? I mean, I often talk about simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, right? Leonardo da Vinci is famous for that. And I think in many ways, our strategy at Yesway, as well as collectively with the channel, is pretty simple. It is a relentless focus on the consumer. And I think, there are two words that were paramount the past 3 years, and even more so as we look forward: flexibility and agility. And I think that the retailers that were able to be nimble, to embody flexibility and agility, were the retailers that were winners. It's data driven at the end of the day. I mean, retail, we have thousands of transactions per store per day. You can find all kinds of patterns in the data. I can say a consumer who buys Monster or Red Bull, what's their affinity with other products, and then mine that data to be more smart and inform my marketing and my merchandising. So all of that played a major role. I think the big takeaway overall is that COVID in many ways was the acceleration age. So everybody's roadmap has the same stuff on it, right? It's not that different. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, we're working on mobile ordering, we want to do curbside, we want to be more convenient, drive-throughs, some people working on drones and robots and bring it to me, all of that. Well, COVID made that go from nice to have to got to have it right here, right now. And let's rally as a team, figure it out. Because if I have to close or I have to do weird things to maintain operations, I need to be more flexible, more agile, more nimble to still run my business. And I don't think that was just convenience, right? If you look at the growth of e-com and omni-channel and click and collect and curbside and drive-through, even at places like Walmart or places, dollar stores, Walgreens, they became much more accelerated in their roadmaps than we ever have. Even EVs now, with the inflationary challenges, there's, we used to jokingly say it's less than 2% of all vehicles. Well, recently you look at it and they're taking off, and every manufacturer now either has an EV already on the market or is at most 6 months from bringing it to market. So change is the constant. I think the pace of change is what has moved much more rapidly. And I think the challenge as a leader and as a marketer is to always keep that eye on the consumer, to take calculated risks, and to make sure that you're testing, because no one absolutely has the answer, and anyone that says that they do, they're off. And it's just about making sure that you have enough tests in motion and you're flexible and agile, that when you see things start heading a certain way, then you take that calculated bet, or you double down rather on that calculated bet, so you can beat the consumer there, or you can meet them there and satisfy those needs.
Yeah, I've always thought too, going back to testing and innovation, such an important way to stay agile is, whether it's the team you're building or the thought that's informing how you're making decisions, it's having, a diverse group of people informing that, brainstorming, keeping you honest. So, we'll switch to DE&I, and talk to me a little bit about, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and specifically how you're thinking about that in the context of building your team and telling the Yes Way story.
Certainly. I think DE&I is good business. I think that's the headline, right? It's the right thing to do because it's good for business and good for your bottom line. And I know some people get upset when you try to quantify things, but I think, like anything that matters, what gets measured gets done. So things that have a bottom line benefit and value will get a leader to focus on them. Surrounding yourself with diversity in all forms: race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, thought, personality, characteristics, traits, only makes you stronger. I talked about our CEO, Tom Turkle. One thing he does, everyone that works for him, he gives them a book called The Wisdom of Crowds. And The Wisdom of Crowds is actually, when it came out, it was provocative. And, it's not overtly about diversity and equity, but in a roundabout manner, it is. It says that I can take any group of random crowd and build a crowd, and they're better suited to solve problems than even an expert panel, right? So I can get folks who've worked in the convenience industry for 20 plus years, and that's my group. Or I can get an eclectic group that represents the swath of America and pull them in. And surprisingly, there's scientific studies that show that that group that is not from similar backgrounds, that has that diversity as part of their core DNA, is able to problem solve at a level that's higher and better than that group of so-called experts. I think getting back to the heart of your question and why it's good for business is going back to the C word of communities. When you're serving a community, this means a lot to me personally. I'm from inner city Washington, D.C., and I grew up in Southeast D.C. shopping. And, we were a food desert. D.C. had, in my childhood, it was a tale of two cities, right? Yes, we were Dodge City and the murder capital of the world. Crime was 10 times worse than it is now. The other side of that was Marion Barry, who was a very misunderstood mayor. He worked with Ronald Reagan and made federal law that contracts had to have representation that reflected what we call Chocolate City growing up. So he literally created the wealthiest concentration of Black wealth anywhere in the world. And a lot of the billionaires, even today, the Kathy Hughes, who owns Radio One, or the Donovan Peebles, who's one of the most successful real estate developers in Miami and New York, he was DC and got federal contracts. Bob Johnson with BET and the cable empires that then, he owned part of the Wizards and then the Charlotte Hornets that Michael Jordan then bought from him. So that vision, and, you can call it a quota or call it whatever you deem, but that was diversity in its earliest essence. It was acknowledgement from, Ronald Reagan, who was on the other end of the political spectrum from Marion Barry, but they worked together. And that partnership created suburbs of Prince George's County and Montgomery County and Howard and Charles County, where to this day you have middle class, affluent, upper middle class, and wealthy African Americans in all walks of life that creates this mosaic of diversity. So I saw that. And as a child, I would shop in stores in my neighborhood. They had bulletproof glass. And I would look at it and say, yeah, I mean, there's crime. I get it. There's 1%, 2% of the bad actors and bad apples. But why does everybody have to suffer? And when I went off to school at University of Iowa, talk about the other end of the spectrum. I go from Chocolate City to Iowa City, Iowa, Big Ten university campus. And I started seeing more sophisticated retail. I had never seen what a Walmart Supercenter, or at that time, it was actually Kmart, was, the big format Kmarts or Target, or even from a convenience realm. I mean, I went to a Quick Trip QT, a Quick Star, or Casey's, and some of these world-class retailers for the first time. Blown away. You walk in, you see a soda fountain, and I can get 50 different choices. And I'm saying, well, Washington, D.C.'s population is like 10 times Iowa City's. How come we didn't have anything like that? So that's when I, realized the importance of democratizing retail and making it accessible. And I started to look at retailers that were on the leading edge of that, the Whole Foods, the Aldi's, Starbucks. I mean, there's a lot of negative you hear about gentrification, but there's also risk taking that those brands do. They will go into places and have truly democratized retail. And the convenience channel does that today. In many ways, my journey's gone full circle, because with Yesway and our Allsup stores, we're opening in rural markets, we're in urban markets, and we try to present ourselves as a world-class retailer, regardless of the community that we serve. We feel that it's important, and having access to fresh food and products and all of that has been something that I've been passionate about. So I know in terms of diversity, that's a very roundabout way to get to it, but I viewed it as I didn't have it. Now that I'm able to ascend to become an executive within retail, I started to see how few looked like me or had backgrounds that were similar to me, but all grew up shopping in stores that I grew up shopping in and could bring some value to that. And I think now, fast forwarding, and I'm 25 plus years into this, having a team that is diverse in terms of having Gen Z folks who work for me and millennial folks on my team has made me so much better. They are bringing things to the table that I would never even think about in a million years, that I'm so close to it. So that inclusion piece, I think, is the one that doesn't get talked about as much. And then the equity means, can I democratize, or can I provide quality experiences regardless of where my brand is manifest? That is diversity, equity, and inclusion at its core in terms of business outcomes. I think in terms of the importance, brands that take the time to capture research, insights, and feedback from a diverse set of inputs outperform those that don't. They don't make the classical errors in judgment that can be obvious, that are offensive, or that can actually tarnish and maybe even take down your brand if you're not cognizant and eyes wide open.
Wisdom of crowds, the wisdom of Derek Gaskin. Let's see, I want to be mindful of time. So I do have one last question before we switch to Q&A, which is really just any upcoming initiatives at Yesway. What's next? What did we not touch on that you want to make sure we talk about now?
Yesway is about growth. And, like our name implies, it's a positive convenience. It is, let's have a affirmation and say, when someone says, no way, yes way. So in many ways, what we have down the road is very similar to what has been in our rear view. It is growing through new stores. It is trying to meet the needs of our consumers. That younger team and even older team that has challenged me has us doing things that I would have never thought we were doing. And through social media, it has opened up opportunities. So some of that acceleration age stuff that I talked about, we are going to have better omni-channel. We're going to have more personal experiences through our rewards program. We are going to incentivize and make sure that our team members are motivated and inspired to come to work every day. And we have aspirations to be the world's best brand. And I hope to be a part of it, and have been very fortunate thus far to be a part of the team that's making it happen.
So, Carrie, do we have any questions from our audience?
Not in the Q&A today. Everybody's been very quiet in the chat, but actually I take that back. We did just have something pop in the chat from David. Competition in this convenience retail space can only benefit the consumer by the enhanced customer experience. So totally agree. It's, rising tide raises all ships.
Yep, exactly.
There will be no wisdom of Carrie Keenan, but I definitely want to read the wisdom of Derek Gaskins when that comes out.
Love it.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. It was a great chat, and we just enjoyed having you and hope to see you again. And then we're going to bring up our last panel of our last chat of the day. We've got Sachin Puri, the VP of Marketing from McAfee. And their moderator is going to be today is Sarah Goff, our VP of Client Partnerships at MyCode. Welcome, everyone. We've had an interesting delay in getting on camera today, so don't feel like it's you. It's been technology day. There you both are. Perfect.
So much. Hello,
Welcome,
everyone.
Good morning. Hey, good morning, everyone.
Depending on where you're at. So yeah, I'm Sarah. I'm with MyCode Media, and I thought we could just maybe start by telling you a little bit about the conversation that Sachin and I had last night. It was a pleasure to speak with you and to prepare for this. We have a lot in common. What does the US's largest multicultural media platform and a global leader in cybersecurity have in common? It turns out we have a lot in common. So it's a really great conversation that we're excited to share with you all. So yeah, Sachin, you want to start by just telling us a little bit about yourself? We can kind of go from there.
Yeah, let's do it. And thanks for laying that out. I mean, we had a really good conversation last night. I kept thinking even afterwards, the thoughts that sparked, but this is Sachin.
Going. We could have stayed up, but we could have had an all-nighter.
We totally could have kept going yesterday, but I'm glad we can continue now and then afterwards too. This is Sachin. I lead marketing for McAfee for anything direct to consumer acquisition based in the Bay Area. The way we are structured is we are structured around end-to-end experience management that are tied within my team. So from first customer touch point to the end, and the engagement from there onwards are part of my team. I've been in marketing for close to 20 years. I'm doing sales and marketing. I spent about a decade in B2B. And then last decade or so, I've been largely focusing on consumer marketing. So I'm excited to be here. Happy to dive both sides. But Sarah, we'll follow your lead and have a conversation.
Yeah, so we both started our careers on the traditional side and have been along for the ride as the digital transformation has happened. I think one of the things that we both, agreed on and found out about each other early on is that, sort of respecting and having a high value for diversity within teams is a key part of leadership and the success that both of our organizations have had. But before we dig into that a little bit deeper, I just want to tell you guys a little bit about MyCode and the work that we do. So we started out as HCode in 2015 and very quickly grew to become the largest US reach for US Hispanics. And we did that by partnering with leading global publishers, in Latinx and European communities, and have deep integrations to reach US Hispanics in the US. And so that model really grew and proliferated into what we now have as B code and A code and Pride code and W code. So we rebranded earlier this year as My Code and run a portfolio business that supports minority multicultural publishers, creators, social media influencers, et cetera. I love the work that we do. I've been here about 2 years, but I have a pretty diverse background myself, starting, as I said, in traditional media and coming along to the digital side in ad tech. It's been a fun ride, and I love speaking with leaders like Sachin, who I think are really pioneering some of the principles that a lot of brands and a lot of organizations that touch brands in that connection point from the very beginning of the marketing funnel all the way down to the consumer experience. I loved some of the work that you were sharing with me that you're doing, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that for everyone that's here.
Absolutely. And I work for McAfee, as I said. McAfee is an iconic brand. I believe most of the audience will be familiar, but if you're not, we provide industry-leading cybersecurity solutions that protect people online. And we have made a conscious decision about 2.5 to 3 years that as the world of cybersecurity is evolving, it is evolving from device-centric to people-centric, because people care more about the privacy and identity of themselves, their kids, their family, the community, versus just protecting the device, which continues to be an important area, but it is evolving over the period of time. So how I explain cybersecurity to my 8-year-old when she says, "Daddy, what do you do at work?" And my answer to that is fairly simple. I keep her, her friends, and family protected online. That makes her explore all the YouTube videos and other videos and the content that she's been exposed to, that she should be exposed to at the age-appropriate level. You touched on some of the aspects. I'll unpack that a little bit more, but I love the work that you guys are doing. I spent so much time on the blogs that you guys have written. Highly recommend others to read it as well, just as a marketing leader, as a business leader, as well as a consumer. I think some really amazing work. So kudos to my code team and how we have evolved the codes there.
Thank you.
In terms of my approach to diversity, I've worked globally, and to some extent, having worked in Europe, Asia Pacific, and in the US, and having teams that span across every continent. My teams span like more than 15 countries globally. And it's something that
I love how even in the US, your experience is diverse. Like you've spent some time in the Midwest, on the East Coast, and the West Coast. Like what you guys were really talking to a global leader here, which is very exciting. And I love
been a globetrotter. I don't know how my wife feels about it. I think she likes it. She knows me that way. Having lived in Asia a few places, I lived in Germany a little bit, and even in the US, I've been in Michigan, New York, Austin, Portland. Now I'm in the Bay Area for the last 10 years, but kept traveling. So I love traveling and meeting different people. I think it did shape my thinking of and seeing the talent and the expertise and the skill set that people are bringing from different experiences. This also goes back to my first boss 20 years ago, who told me different people are different in different ways, and you have to learn to appreciate the differences the way they are presented to you. And we truly try to bring that to life at McAfee or anywhere that I've led, is bringing people from different parts and walks of life with different expertise. We have performance marketers in our team. We have visual designers sitting in Spain. We have copywriters at different parts of the world. And we also have really deep insights folks who are coming from a completely different background altogether. And what we have found is when you bring people from diverse set and build a culture of collaboration and dialogue, the dialogue leads to hypotheses, insights that leads to a variety of different testing that you do. We do more than 400 tests a quarter, and that dives a little bit more deeper, richer experiences that you can show to the customer. End of the day, we are in the customer business, we are in the people business, and we represent the people we are reaching out to. And the more diversity of thoughts and ideas you bring in, it is good for business, it's good for consumer, and it makes it fun to work with.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I really latched onto when we were talking that I'm going to commit to memory are your 5 C's, because I imagine that there are a set of unique challenges when, opening up the freedom and flexibility to really allow people to bring their full selves to work and sort of bypass where they are geographically or what time zone they're in, and making that work within a large organization, I think is really unique. And I thought that what you shared about those principles was really insightful. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. And take those as 5 C's. How can you talk to a marketer and not have 5 C's, 5 P's,
not
or
have an acronym,
5 or 4s of those acronyms that we kind of throw in? But another 5 C's that I believe from leadership standpoint, that has worked well for me. And I follow them diligently where I work. So as a leader, the first and foremost important piece of the C's is clarity. The clarity of purpose, strategy, and vision. So you should build with your team collaboratively where we are going, what's the purpose. Like, for example, we exist at Mac to protect people online. There is a clarity of what we want to accomplish in terms of KPIs, business, and the longer term goal across consumer metrics, business metric, as well as other experience metric that we track on. So that's one. Once you define that, nobody's second guessing, and you're aligning your organization to this clarity. The second C, which I very fundamentally believe in, as a leader, our jobs is to create more leaders and build teams. So that's my second C. How do you cultivate the experience and create more leaders who can go and multiply that effect? The third C comes down to the culture. This is where you bring differentiation. You start bringing differentiation with your competitors. The culture of collaboration and growth mindset is something that I have pivoted to my entire life. I grew up and I always had a growth mindset of doing today better than yesterday. Today, we call it as A/B testing or experimentation. And we have KPIs and fancy frameworks to track it, but it's just having that culture of growth mindset as a collaborative mind is my third C. Huge differentiator for us. If anybody comes to me, what is a differentiator? That is our culture. And I can give you some examples that we were talking last night. The fourth is communicate. Talk to your team. Talk early, regularly, often, one-to-one with different settings. You regular have one-on-one with your team, all hands, provide that visibility of communication. Today's generation is all about communication and connection. If you don't have that, then it is a single-sided dialogue versus a monologue versus it's a dialogue and bidirectional conversation. And the last C is compassion. End of the day, we are in the people's business. Humans have, especially in the last 2.5 to 3 years, what we have all experienced as humanity, our work and personal has kind of become a very much of a continuum. And having that compassion of where somebody is coming in, what their aspirations are, or what their family situation is, what their personal situation is, and having a compassion. Empathy is good. Empathy drives, I understand what you're saying. Compassion is leaning in. How can I help?
I love that. Everybody write that down. These are the 5 C's: clarity, creation of leaders, culture, communication, and compassion. Yes, and I think McAfee made a good bet on the internet, growing the way that it has.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about, because you said culture is the number one important thing. Tell us a little bit about how that comes into play from a leadership perspective in building a team all the way through retaining a team and really leading them to success.
Yeah, happy to unpack. It really comes down to 2 key principles. One team, one dream, and you will see that across the board. And second, celebrate. I used to say celebrate small wins, but now I've come to a point of celebrate all wins. So let me unpack that. So as we engage at the hiring stage itself, we look for leaders who are passionate about team broader than what their role is. It's never about the role, but about the team and the broader purpose that we are going after. Second, they are looking for nurturing teams and creating leaders. And they've had experience or leaning in towards building that. So right at the onset, you have set Slack channels where people come in and we welcome them. Everybody welcomes them. They make an introduction. They engage on those Slack channels. We celebrate the birthdays and we celebrate all the wins that we have. Few other examples are what we do, which is unique, and I would recommend if other leaders to follow in, is growth awards. So essentially think of these as a quarterly leadership awards. Typically you have, hey, these people are really amazing, they're great collaborators, great contributors, going extra miles. Instead of those being drive and decision by leaders, which is a CMO or a VP, it is more organically driven by the team members itself. So every quarter.
I love this so much because there's themes, right? You were explaining that like they're fun themes and you let, the teams kind of drive what that is and it gets everybody excited.
Yes, it does. And then I get to, for example, our last theme was Oscars. So best actors, best actresses, and best visual designer and best debutant. So we are also celebrating the new members. And I get one vote, just like everybody else. I don't even know who the winners are, and it's disclosed at the end of the voting. So it's team chosen, which drives truly the culture of one team, one dream, of how they want to shape the culture of the organization.
So fun. Yeah, we like to do things where we recognize our peers at MyCode as well. One of the things that I was sharing with Sachin that I think has been a key differentiator for us too is that, we've had the organic privilege of building a team from the ground up that is very diverse. I think we have, over 13 countries of origin represented, and the work is just better. I think having and pulling up a seat at the table for, future leaders is really important and something that we both have, decided is a secret to success in business and in marketing. Okay, so let's go on to the next question, which is, tell us a little bit about how your personal and professional experiences have influenced your leadership style.
We touched upon that in the beginning itself. I've been traveling around the globe, have worked with different teams. So for me, diversity is kind of embedded into the way I just approach. And to me, diversity is the diversity of thoughts, experience, backgrounds, ideas, and hypotheses. I've built some of the most diverse and inclusive teams wherever I've worked. I think it's subconscious. I just gravitate towards more, hey, what somebody is bringing in onto the table, what their background is, and that's always been the decision criteria, and how they fit in and enhance the culture versus a mold that they have to fit into a particular.
When somebody's new to your team and they're just sort of getting their feet wet and level setting, getting used to a new job, what are some of the things that you do as a leader to help support that and make yourself?
So accountability, there are two things that go together: accountability and decision making. So I truly believe my leaders have the complete power and authority to make decisions, but they're also accountable for the outcome. And I'm available as a resource to collaborate with them and provide ideas or open any doors if they get stuck to. So what I do is, and I do this as a principle, whoever joins as my direct leadership team I spend first week, every single day, 30 minutes, just to bring them up to speed, what the organization, who the players are, what's the strategy. Remember, my first week, clarity and aligning on that purpose every single day. Second week, I go alternate days. And we spend more in terms of how do we go deeper into the business, the teams, what are the KPIs, their ideas, how are we going to run? And when we get to the third week, it is driven by the leader who has joined my team, how much she or he wants to engage and how and at what frequency. At the very least, there's going to be a leadership meeting and then one one-on-one with that leader. But I'm open. So for over the 3 weeks window, we're meeting every day to alternate week, then the leader driven, I think really helps people get started fairly quick.
I think this is so great. It's huge because, as an organization grows and really starts to accelerate, having that clarity of purpose and having, a very senior leader such as yourself put in that time, it just makes so much sense. And I think, everyone should be doing that if they're not already.
I would highly encourage
there to do the same and to sort of model that in the way that the entire teams get executing their whatever they're doing day to day, which kind of brings me to the cross-functional piece of the conversation that we talked about. Speak a little bit about how within a very large organization, how that works,
It's hard. I think most of the audience will relate to it. Working cross-functional is challenging, but it is also very enriching. So it's very similar. So my definition, at least principally, runs beyond just my team. So all the partners, cross-functional partners that we work with, the concept of one team, one dream works very well with them too. So which is, it starts with what is it that we are solving together? Everyone has a role to play. For example, we work with a really amazing e-commerce leader who builds really amazing products that we use to go to market and build experiences that we want to build in. So early on, beginning of the year, we do the planning together. When we do the planning together, it really percolates down to, okay, what are the OKRs? We aligned on the OKRs early on and the associated timelines and collaboration more. And then time to time, as new member come in, we celebrate them coming in, their victories, joint victories, CEO awards, we share the nominations together. Also, every organization has certain level of bravos or kudos that you give internally. I always keep about 25% of the capacity in my bravos or kudos to cross-functional team members as a principle. 25% of the kudos and bravos will go to cross-functional leaders. And that forces the thinking that it is a one bigger team versus just one unit. So that's one. Second, your regular one-on-ones, joint meetings, joint brainstorming ideas, focus on the bigger pictures, try to predict the conflicts early on. Harder, easier said than done. We can come on the panel and we can have a chat about it, and I can say, we can predict. But in the cases where it arises and it catches you by surprise, keeping the emotions aside and having a very factual, data-driven conversation. And then you bring in the compassion of
absolutely
who that person is, what's the background, what they might be dealing with, and then kind of go from there. But it starts with, again, aligning on the OKRs. I've seen success of that in my previous organization as well. When I was at StubHub, our CEO did a phenomenal job of establishing OKRs top down. Absolutely stunning job. And I think it's a model that I've adopted at McAfee too, to aligning on those OKRs. I think it works.
Well, and some of the stories that you shared, which I just resonated with so much, was, really enabling your team through that principle of accountability, but then when needed, stepping in to take the fall if you have to, right? But never throw them under the bus, which is so key, and just a really good example of, I think, positive leadership out of gratitude and compassion. So I love that about you.
I think what we talked yesterday was more just for the broader, is like when, this is again, I get into some of these cheesy places, but I feel that they make you remember is when your fear of failure is more than fear of missing out, you will never take risk.
That's right.
So you should always have I don't want to miss out. You want to keep ideating, keep innovating, but there is always someone who's got your back. Mm-hmm. If it is thoughtfully enough, and then you learn from whatever your experience is, I think your team innovates. And in our business, innovation is the only currency, in my opinion. And it manifests itself in tests.
This has been my experience at MyCode too. As a startup that's fast growing, I mean, we have to be in that mindset of, go for it. Take a shot, because you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Look at all these cliches we're throwing out, but it's good because they're easy to remember, and they're really good principles. My kitty cat is just joining me here. Sorry, a little cameo. But we've talked a little bit about the, we've talked a lot about so far, within the organization, but let's connect that to the consumer experience. So McAfee being an organization that has really, I think, done a great job of pivoting to be less technical and to, be less assumptive on, what the benefits or, the USP for the brand is, to really putting everything, at the, in the circumference of the consumer in the middle. So talk to me a little bit about, how you guys do that and how you keep that focus.
Yep. So 2.5 or 3 years ago, if you had come to McAfee's blog or our website, it was very much centered around technology and us, like you would find a big Milky Way that said what we stand for and what our motto is and device to cloud security. If you've read our blogs, they would talk about a particular blog and how it affects your kernel and how deeply it goes, change your registry, and that could create vulnerability of your device, etc., which for consumer world is just blah. You don't understand. Like, what does it mean? So it is important. And there is a set of segment that is interested in that information. So we do create blogs on that. But from there, what really accelerated our thinking around that was just purely two principles when the pandemic hit and everybody started to work from home. Is one, we have fundamentally decided that we don't believe in fear-based marketing. So when the time everybody was scrambling to work from home, we decided to, hey, just be more positive outlook. And number two principle was just be out there and be helpful to the community. So we started investing and shifted towards more consumer-centric content. And our early phase of content were focused towards what resources are available to you to homeschool your kids, resources available to you to look for a job, dating. There are a lot of singles out there. How do they date online? Or a lot of people could not attend funerals or weddings. So how do you attend those remotely? How do you keep your conversation with your doctor private? So a lot of different models that evolved since then, which if I look back at, we were very strategic about it, but we are truly driven by just two principles: be helpful and not scare people, not be fear-based. But since then, we have very strongly gravitated towards more consumer-centric content. The content we are building is easily consumable on mobile phone. Click of a button, you can share with your friends and family or whoever you want. That information will be helpful. It's like 5 ways you can stay protected. 5 ways kids are using TikTok. 3 things you want to know as a parent about TikTok or some of the social platform. So we have really shifted our focus towards more consumer-centric media, consumer-centric content that people can relate to. In addition, there was a need for the technical content. So we created an online academy that we call as Learn with McAfee, where you can have one-on-ones on cybersecurity. Okay, what is personal data cleanup? Yes, we can all go and clean our data online if you want to, so that online brokers don't.
A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people do not know that, and it's so important.
It is important. I think the problem we are trying to solve is when there is a tangible risk, we all react towards this. For example, we all have auto insurance, home insurance, flood, or earthquake, whatever that entails that we can tangibly see. And as a family, we discuss about the intangible risk that cybersecurity presents. It's real, it's intangible, you can't feel and see, and you don't actively talk about, is where the awareness and education starts to play in. But if we go super technical, you'll not get the receptivity and we miss delivering the purpose that we have. So that's why we shifted more towards more consumer-centric model. That it is important for us as consumers to be aware of what the risks are, but B, more importantly, there is something we can do about it. And there are solutions that are available at your fingertips if you want to go after that. We generally choose not to put monetization when we are doing that, because the goal there is just to create education and awareness and a dialogue there.
Well, and I love that. And that's the right thing to do, right? If as in a large organization, you have the resources, I mean, that's making the change you want to see in the world, which just as a mom of 2 kids that are, tapping into the metaverse and, they are light years ahead of where I was at their age. And it's really important work. So thank you for what you're doing in keeping that clarity front and center, because I think that it does impact all of our lives. And I love what you said about, really having the utility to help people, during a global pandemic, not miss out on those key moments: weddings, funerals, business meetings, school, all the things. I don't think any one of us, anybody in the audience either, could have imagined the acceleration that would have happened in the online space, but here we are. And I think that there's still a lot to do in bringing entire communities along. And what you were talking about the 3 questions that are guideposts for your team, can you share a little bit more about that, and how you make sure that it comes back, use that as a tool to bring it back to that consumer-centric model?
Happy to. So let me give a little bit plug on the consumer side, as well as, since you touched on the parent, I'm a parent myself. And we just did release a 10-country study on connected families. And what we found was really profound, which so general summary is that kids are looking for parents for guidance to keep them protected. Our role in their eye is a protector, even online. But we are coming short of delivering on that promise or the expectation. Like nearly half of the parents don't even have password in their own mobile phones. And that number drops to further 13 points when it goes to 10 to 15 points when it comes to children's phones. So we are less prone to put a password on our phone, but even lesser when it comes to our kids' phone. So imagine if you losing your phone on an Uber or a coffee shop, it's all exposed to everybody. So do have your password, have them password protected, double factor authentication.
And you're cloud enabled. I've lost many phones, I can tell you.
Yes, so two-factor enablement and of course cloud enablement, but do protect your kids' phone as well. Back to what we were discussing yesterday. I think having worked in sales and marketing for this long, one thing gets embedded is that you always start with your customer and what experience you want to deliver to your customer, whether it is live meeting or it is online digital now. I started offline 20 years ago, and now it's all digital, if you will. Of course, we have traditional media too. So 3 questions that I always ask any experiences that we are building with my team. 1, what do we want the customer to feel? Now, this is almost the question is, it's a hot day outside, really summer, and it's walking into a cool air conditioning room and having a drink of your choice. This is just that one experience. What do you want them to feel as soon as they are exposed to the experience that you're building? Second question is more performance oriented. What do you want them to do? This is behavioral element. You want them to download your product, engage with your product, activate a particular service, learn a blog, or convert or buy. Whatever that is, be very clear what that behavior is and keep that. Like, what do you want them to do? And the third one is more longer term in my perspective is, what do you want them to believe? We are here to support you. You can do something about cybersecurity protection online. I trust this company. Whatever that belief that you want to drive as a brand has to come through in the experiences that you're building. So I'll repeat, what do you want them to feel? This is all about aesthetics and to some extent, as they see the first experience, what do you want them to do? This is all behavioral. And the third one is, what do you want them to believe? And that's a long-term piece, which builds over multiple iterations and experiences that customers have with you.
Do you think that the first 2, the feel and the do, are prerequisites for that believe moment? Or do you think that there is an opportunity to jump to believe in the middle?
I think that's a good question. From my experience, the first 2 are definitely prerequisite, but what I have often seen is that people stop at the first 2.
Yeah.
This is amazing experience. Oh my God, just look at the download rates or just look at the conversion. It's phenomenal. But this is not a one-time engagement with your customers. The performance marketer in me, who has always worked as a business person, as lifetime value of a customer and the cost of acquisition, that balance, that if you only focus on the first C, which is the customer acquisition cost, the first 2 can probably deliver that in the short term. But on a longer term basis, to drive LTV, lifetime value, you have to go and solve for that belief. And as a leader, it's our job to ask that question. This is great, phenomenal conversion. What do you think people walked away believing?
And validate it, right? Like, find out the why. This has been a huge part of, MyCode's success and growth. We have a piece of our business that is Intelligence Center. We have a very diverse team in and of ourselves, but we are asking the communities that we serve all the time, how are different things impacting them for brands, but also proactively. So we publish for the industry at large fact packs on an annual basis and are constantly rolling out studies. And that has really, I think, helped us, our partners, our brand partners, but also the consumers that we serve, because it brings their voice to the forefront. And that's really, one of the ways that we stay focused and, figure out like, how do we have those like belief reinforcement moments, you know, that you mentioned? Because I think sometimes as marketers, we can focus a little bit too much on the KPIs and lose acknowledgement of the fact that like things move so fast in the digital space that sometimes it's good to sort of like revisit or, you know, put the art and, you know, our brains behind the numbers and really ask why and dig into that sense of curiosity.
I agree. Just 2 quick points on that. One, I mean, having done subscription e-commerce, transactional e-commerce, like all sorts of marketplaces, subscription e-commerce forces you to think on LTV and why and the belief. But having said that, I think the broader plug for the community here, marketers, is as I started my marketing before cookies existed, then cookies existed, they changed the world, and you could target the customer across the board, wherever it is. Laws have come since then to protect consumer privacy and the right to use their information as they want them to be used. So we are moving to the world, if not already living, where cookies are going to be not as helpful as they were in the past. So context becomes way more important of engaging with the customer on a broader scale versus a more one-to-one targeted marketing, if you will, and which is where the why plays a huge role. So it's a hard one. It's a very hard thing to deliver. It's a hard thing to enable, but it's something that, what's fun if it is not hard? It's something that we should all aspire towards and work towards, more so because that is what, as a marketer, we'll be left with as the world of identity and cookies become less and less available to us in our disposal.
And identity protection, just as a consumer, is so important, but understanding, you know, who your target audience is and how to effectively reach them and communicate them is so important as a marketer. So, you know, those two things converging, you know, is interesting. I think we've all been talking about the cookie apocalypse for a while now. But context is really important, but just kind of going back to leadership and building teams, I think, you know, having team members that can help tease out that context and really, you know, sort of decipher meaning from the data points that are going to be available, whether it's, you know, contextual consumption or looking at different behavioral patterns, you know, things that we know, and building CRM databases to have that direct, you know, line of communication and being able to extrapolate that out to get new customers, you know, sort of in the funnel, if you will, is really, you know, interesting and a challenge that we're all going to have to be working together to solve.
I agree. It's a quick plug. Maybe it was people helpful. I wrote an article about 2 years ago about 5 important things for experimentation. It's available online. If community looks it up, it's at Ad Exchanger. I think you might find it helpful. And it touched upon some of the aspects, Sarah, that you were talking. Those are so important.
I'd love to read it. Could you maybe,
I'll post the article. I'll post the link here. Yeah.
Thank you. You know, and I think we're coming up near time, if I'm not mistaken. I don't want to run too over, but I'd love to hear a little bit about what advice would you give to an aspiring leader?
Be curious and always start from the customer. These are the 2 things I follow religiously every single day. I'm a naturally curious guy, but I would advise that, and then always keep customer in mind and work backwards.
This is a similar question. Maybe you just answered it in that response, but what advice would you give to your younger self?
Those 2, and be patient, because I learned from my recent leader is, you want to go further, it's again cliche. You want to go further, be together. If you're going to go faster, go alone. And I think in businesses, you have to go farther, and you want to go farther at scale, and you go faster when you have everybody along with you. So I would give myself 20 years younger, be a little bit more patient, and go from there. But continue to be curious, continue to ask questions that customers would ask. Put yourself in customer shoe. You can never go wrong, because customers will not let you go wrong.
Absolutely. And I think go out there and be a customer, whatever that means for you, right? Like you've lived a lot of different places. I've lived a lot of different places. I think we both share a love of travel. And I think it's, you know, it's putting yourself in consumer positions. One of the things that, you know, I love to do if I'm trying to solve a problem for a client that I'm, you know, working with, is I'll go, if it's a retail client, I'll go to the store. I want to experience exactly where they are. and what that means, because that I think that experiential part of it, and really like even what you talked about, you have to be local to go global. Those are synergistic concepts, and being kind of infusing that into your leadership style too, I think also reinforces being able to come back to the consumer. Do you want to talk a little bit about local for global? Because I thought that was really an interesting concept.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that. Happy to. So very simple. My philosophy is, if you want to be global, you have to go local. Otherwise, you'll always be an international company in a country. So go local to be global, else be an international company. So how it manifests is, like, as we build journeys and experiences in Germany, France, India, China, we build these local pods of teams that are cross-functional in nature, who understand and start from the local needs of the customer, the local nuances, the local calendar, local retail moments, local slangs that people use in a particular country. For example, in UK, people use, they don't call it a Scot. So things of that nature that you have to start getting into to truly be a local company. Otherwise, it will always perceive as a North America centric view, or wherever you're based in, you're bringing that to the country.
Even with America, we find that in a lot of the work that we do, that authenticity is key, and having those cultural nuances. We say all the time, even within, let's take H code as an example, our first and founding code. The Hispanic community is not a monolith, and we cannot speak to the Hispanic community in that way and expect to break through. And so, yeah, like I couldn't agree with that more. And we find that, across all of the codes that we represent, it really, those cultural nuances, which a lot of times are local experiences, really matter. They do.
I think the word you used yesterday, Sarah, was no broad strokes. You got to go a little bit more targeted there.
Yeah.
Agree. That's our sign. Carrie is here. So
Carrie's
I'm not the hook. I just wanted to say I tweeted out your article using the hashtag BI Livecast. If anybody wants to read it, you'll be able to grab it there too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you both so much for joining. I appreciate it. I'll let you finish up, Sarah. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think we've covered everything we wanted to talk about. I don't know if anyone has any questions or anything, but Sachin, thank you. This has been a wonderful experience.
Likewise.
All the cats are photobombing today, apparently. Thanks to everybody for joining us today. Big shout out to all of our cats, our speakers, our sponsors, and of course you and our audience. Be sure to check out our Brand Innovators website to learn about our next influential events, and live and in person, and also online. And have a great day.